I know, right? There's really nothing else. But I always like to ask people in the beginning, what have you read recently that you really loved? Or what are you in the process of reading that you are really enjoying?
So I just finished a classic book called Chess Story. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have not.
Um, okay, it's like 80 pages, so it's not even it's a novella. But it follows it, it oh, I'm dying. Sorry. The the live stream just kicked on my computer in my ears, and then I heard
Oh,
myself talking while I was trying to talk. Sorry.
I hear you.
I am a professional. Um, The it takes place on a ship, and
Okay.
there's a
Right up your
professional
alley.
chess player. I know, right? That's why I picked it up. So, there's a professional chess player, and, there's, like, a group of people that try to challenge him to play chess, and he stomps them all, but then there's one lone guy who's in the back, and he's like, "Hey, don't make that move." And anyway,
Mhm.
it progresses to them playing, and he does an amazing job, and then we learn how he became good at chess, and it was actually that he endured isolation torture, and,
Ooh,
chess and doing chess over and over and over again in his mind was what kept him
sane.
sane. Yeah, it
Mhm.
kept him alive during that time. So it's
Yeah.
just 80 pages, it's super compact, but oh my goodness,
Loved it?
yeah, it was incredible the way he described the game of chess, which I don't care about, as well as his isolation was so gripping, and
Mm.
it was such a tragic but compelling story. It was brilliant.
That was gonna be my follow-up is, do you actually play chess? And that was part of what
No, I
endeared you
couldn't
to it.
care less. I don't even know the rules.
I just started learning chess, and it was an agreement with my husband because he had used to play chess and wanted to start playing again. And he was like, "Well, I want to
Yes.
play with you." And I was like, "Okay." So we made an agreement that he would read 3 Sanderson novels, and then I would read or learn to play chess because
How is that fair?
it's just not. But I mean, I mean, that's basically what it was. But it was like he wasn't going to read Sanderson otherwise. So I was like, okay, well, I
I'm
want
gonna
you to
force
have to
it.
read him, and this will be my in, and we'll do this together, I guess. So he has now since read
Smart.
Elantris and is reading Warbreaker right now, which I'm very excited about.
So
And
you're about
then
to become a chess pro.
not quite, but, like, it's so frustrating because I'm super competitive, so I hate losing. I just do not thrive with losing, and I'm sitting there, and that was the same thing,
You
and I'm
don't
like,
thrive
I
losing.
no, I don't thrive with it at all, and I couldn't see the patterns of this stuff on the board because 'cause I've been learning on chess.com because I find
Yeah,
that's easier because online
yeah.
you can see the whole board, and I'm just, I guess, blind in real life where when I'm looking at the actual playing board, I'm like, "Well, this does not work." So, I just can't see it. I can't see it, so,
You'll
yeah,
get
I
it.
totally get it.
If he's reading
Eventually.
3 Sanderson books, you'll get it.
So he's reading 3 Sanderson books, and I'm dragging him to Dragonsteel in December. So it's
Oh my
kind of like
goodness.
a bigger thing. But I also was like, I don't want you to be the only person at Dragonsteel who hasn't read a Sanderson
He either
book.
really likes you or he really loves chess, that
I
he's
mean,
doing this for
I
chess.
would probably say chess, but never know.
It's amazing.
Well, that's cool. So what genre would you say that this story falls into really? Because it doesn't sound super fantasy-ish unless maybe it is.
No, it's an Austrian classic, and it's probably just lit fic
Okay.
or like
And who's
a
the author of this?
psychological oh, I don't
Not to
have the
put you
book
on the
on
spot.
me. I don't
Yeah,
have the book on me, so I couldn't say. Um,
it's okay.
it's called Chess Story. Someone in the chat maybe might know.
Anita was saying, "Are you talking about Chess Story?" Yes, she is. So,
Yes.
Anita, tell us what the author's name is. And Evie is saying, "I thought it was nonfiction." So we're just getting corrected on all of
No.
these things, but
Chess
I don't
Story
know.
isn't. It is the last story he wrote before he tragically died of himself. I don't know if I'm allowed, like, I don't know if you are okay with me using that word,
That is
unalived
fine.
himself.
It was more so just the hand action of
I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to censor it.
yeah. So his
Matt has
last
it.
novel. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna assume Steven Zweig. That's how I'm gonna say the name, but I could be very, very wrong, and I'm sorry.
Evie, it might I'm saying no to it being nonfiction, but it likely had some grounding in reality, like some of his own personal experience likely went into the making of it, but I also don't know an extreme amount about it.
Mhm. So, have you finished this story now, or you're still
Mhm.
in the process of reading?
Yeah,
Okay,
it was just 80 pages.
that's I love when you can find a book that's like that.
As Sanderson fans.
Oh, it's pretty rare, but okay, before we talk about Sanderson, because 'cause we're gonna talk about Sanderson a little bit, but I don't know how you started on Booktube, so I'm super curious because, like, you are very involved in Booktube. You put out a ton of videos, which I'm always so amazed that you have the wherewithal to keep doing that because I do a video, like, every 10 days, and I'm like, "Well, that was exhausting." So, what compelled you to start on Booktube?
I wanted to talk about books. I have a very obsessive nature, like,
I hear
I don't
you.
have hobbies, I have personality traits. So yeah. So, reading was one of my biggest hobbies, and when I found, I think I found Jessie the Reader first,
Hmm,
and when I realized that reading could be a group activity, it was like,
yeah.
"Alright, hold me back. Like, this is just what we're doing now." So, reading being social was
Mhm.
like, there was
Yeah,
no going back from that.
that's awesome. Okay, so and you've been on here now for how many years?
I think like 7 and a
That's
half or
awesome.
7 or 8, I don't know, too
Mhm.
many.
But I mean, that's great. Do you remember what your first video was about?
No.
No. Okay.
Maybe Harry Potter World. I don't even know if it was about books.
Mine was about Sanderson.
Of course it was.
Yeah, I mean, if Alan shows up at some point in the chat and he's gonna hear me talking about Sanderson, he's just gonna say, like,
He'll show up as soon as we get into our Sanderson chat.
but that's awesome. So have you always been a really big reader then? Was it fantasy that kind of drew you into reading initially or not even?
No, yeah, I've always been a reader, and I was big into contemporary when I'm trying to, like, make sure that my I don't want my hair to be rubbing against this. Um, contemporary was the big thing that I was reading when I started BookTube, and I actually would all those videos are private now, so you'll never know, but I would on the record all the time be like, "I don't like fantasy, don't recommend me fantasy, I don't read
Really?
fantasy." Really,
Oh,
I know.
wow.
I g care to take a guess what got me into fantasy?
Does it rhyme with Schmanden Sanderson?
Yes. Mistborn was my introduction to fantasy, and then I
That's
was
awesome.
ruined.
Okay, so oh, that's so funny to me because I have found on BookTube in general the love for Mistborn and the love for Wheel of Time have been really the two driving forces more so than other series. I feel like, and it's because it's that nostalgia factor of for most people Wheel of Time was their first foray into adult fantasy, or for Mistborn, it's a lot of people either coming back to fantasy or
Mm.
just experiencing fantasy for the first time, which I always find so interesting. So when I started seeing a lot of booktube content, it was heavy on the pushing of Mistborn, Mistborn, Mistborn. And I was
It
like,
still is.
oh, I guess I'm gonna have to read this trilogy because I haven't read it. And I read it very quickly and enjoyed it. And then that was what my first booktube videos were on, were the my reviews for Erewhon.
See,
So
it was meant to be. You're a
it
true
was meant
booktuber.
to be. So what was it about Mistborn? Were you like hooked on the first book then, or did it kind of take you? I'm gonna pause you before you answer this because I remember now, and it's just coming back to me that when I read through it, after I read each book, I went and I watched your reviews for them, and I was like, hardcore lover of book two. Well of Ascension was my favorite book of the three. And you
I
were like,
do.
book two is my favorite. I was like, oh my gosh, Murphy and I agree. Book two
We're
is
on
the
an
best.
island. It's
Yes.
just you and me that live here.
I know because everyone was like, oh, book three is so great. And book one is so great. Book two, bottom. And I was like, what are you
Just
all
get
saying?
through book 2. I
Yeah.
know.
What are you guys saying?
What are
Best
you
book.
saying? Yes.
Exactly.
Couldn't
My
agree
favorite.
more.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, they were
Yeah.
all good,
Yeah.
but book 2, Oh,
Yes, Evie. Alan actually does like Wall of Ascension, which is something I found out later because I thought Alan would have just hated it because it was Brandon Sanderson, but he actually really does like Wall of Ascension the best of the three. But what was it about Mistborn that you really made you think, oh, I can maybe go further into fantasy at this point?
I remember when I reviewed it, I remember saying that everybody was talking about Mistborn by saying, "Oh, the magic system is so cool and the world building is so extensive." And I was like, "Those things are boring. Let me tell you about the characters."
Yeah.
I was super into Ven and I
Yeah.
was super into the found family. So I haven't
Okay.
changed that much.
Yeah. I like that too. Found family is one of my favorite tropes.
Oh my goodness. You can't go
Yeah.
wrong with a good found family.
No, you really can't, which we'll talk a little bit about because I finished a book today that I know you were gonna wanna
You
talk
finished it
about.
today.
I finished
Did you
today.
speed read the end just so that you could say, "I finished it today" in this
I
chat?
wanted to finish it today so it was fresh on my brain, so if we did talk about it, I would be in the right
If,
headspace to talk about
if
it. Yes, exactly. Knowing we would talk about it, that I would be in the right headspace because I've just been kind of breezing through books lately, and I was like, "Oh, if I finish it and then I read this bunch, like, I'm not gonna have it at the front of my brain, and I wanna actually know things that I can say off the top of my head."
nothing is
Uh,
ever at the front of my brain, so you probably will know more than me even though I'm obsessed with it. We're
it's
talking about the Lies of Locke.
We are, everybody. I finished The Lies of Lockamore today. It was a super fun read. I did a little bit of physical reading, but mostly did the audiobook. And there were several moments that had me cackling, which I thought were very funny. So I greatly enjoyed the humor in that book because, like you, I very much like satirical and just dry humor. Like I live for that. And I've come to realize that a lot in the last year. I'm like, "Oh, I really enjoy humor in books," which I used to kind of think was more just a passive thing where it was like, "Oh, you can kind of have one character that's funny." And it's like, "Oh, that's nice that they're there." But overall, I really appreciate humor, especially from
Yeah,
a narrator. Oh, so
yes. A
good.
narrative with a humorous bent to it is like,
Yeah.
it's so especially when it lands just right. Like, for instance, I don't know, Scott Lynch is really good at that, and he can just tuck it into his scene so perfectly.
Mhm. Exactly. There was one moment specifically where I'm not gonna, for people that haven't read it, but a character dies and someone refers to them as being pickled, and I laughed so hard. Like I actually almost spat out my water. I was like, "That's fantastic."
Are you talking about the horse piss death?
Yes,
That
100%.
was not
It was
you
so
laughed
it
at
was
that?
so funny. I laughed so hard. I mean, not at like what had happened to this person, but the way it was described as being pickled, I was like, "Come on."
Oh my gosh. To be fair, when you said someone died, I immediately thought about someone else, and I was like, "There was nothing funny about that."
No, 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 no. But that scene made me laugh quite a bit. And I loved the I'm blanking on his name now, of course. It's not
Michael
Father.
Page.
Sorry?
Michael Page.
No, his mentor when he's a
Chase.
child. Thank you. Love him. He was the funniest part of the book for me overall. His
He's
lessons were
amazing.
always so funny. So yeah, I thought it was a very, very well done book. It's one of those books too that I didn't realize it was part of a series for a really long time because I kept seeing it just show up as The Lies of Lockamora. And it does read that it could be a standalone if it wanted to. So I am really curious when I get to the follow-up books as to where they pick up from, just because I'm like, oh, it does in many ways feel like it's concluded, at least this part of the story. So I'm assuming we go to different areas and different places in the follow-up books. So have to read
We'll
and find
see.
out. Yes.
Yes, Evie, you're right.
What did Evie say? Oh, yes, 100%. That is what happened, and I
It is
laughed.
a thing, indeed.
I laughed.
I agree, Daniel. All the Gentleman Bastard books are pretty episodic. I think
Mm,
most of them you read and you're like, "Okay, I just had a full story."
yeah. Okay. Is that why you like it so much? Do you prefer when things are episodic, or do you prefer when they kind of carry and lean into each other?
I'm really fine either way.
Yeah.
I think both are great.
So I know that you are someone that is not super particular about endings. And has that something that's changed for you over time? Are you feeling like you're still really okay with there not being endings
Oh,
for
yeah.
things?
I don't think Chess Story. I think that ending, I got to the end and I was like, "Huh, okay, excellent book." And it was like, yeah, you I'm still that way where if I get to an end, unless it's terrible, like, unless
Yeah.
it's just a bomb ending, but if it's just like, "Oh, that was an ending," then I'm like, "Neato, the book was great."
I love that. I'm so nitpicky with that though.
Are
I feel
you?
like, yeah, I get really hooked on to ideas that I'm like, oh, I really want to see this play out, or I hope to see that
Ah,
play out. And I suffer from my own self-inflicted disappointment of things not being there. But for
mhm,
me, I feel like when a book is more basic, I'm less inclined to feel that way. Things like A Song of Ice and Fire, which are super intricate and there's so much world building and prophecy. I get so hyper invested in theorizing all the possibilities that when none of them come to fruition, I get so disappointed. But overall, I'm trying more so to be of your approach where I'm like, oh, if I enjoyed everything other than the ending, like it's still a great book. I
right.
have a very hard time divorcing myself of the notion that I'm like, "Oh, the ending ruined it for me."
So if you get to an ending that's good, but it's not the ending you wanted, it's like the antithesis of what you wanted, but it's still well written, is it still ruined because it
No,
didn't fit your
it's not.
dreams? Okay.
No, it's not. If it's done in a way where I'm like, oh, "Okay, yeah, this makes clear sense for the characters, the story, the arc, where we were going," I'm very sated with that, and I'm like, "Perfect. This is." I often would prefer to be wrong. Like, I feel Sanderson has made me into this psychotic reader where, like, I'm always looking for clues now, and I'm like, "Oh, well, this will be connected to this and this and this and this," and I'm just over theorizing to the point where when I get to an end, I'm like, okay, it's not what I was envisioning. Good. Like, that's good that this caught me by surprise and I wasn't able to predict
I
it.
tend to do that too, where I latch on to little tiny details and I'm like, "Obviously, this is worth the gold in the book." And then I
Exactly.
fixate and I'm, like, looking for it everywhere, and I'm not picking up on other clues because I'm fixated on this thing
Yes.
that the author never even indicated was a clue. I just think I'm smarter than everyone else.
I know,
And
right?
then
And
I'm
you're
like,
like,
"Why didn't the doorknob come back into play?" It's like,
100%. I am that
no
way
one
too.
thought it would.
No one thought it would except you. And then you're like, well, it made perfect sense to me. So clearly everyone should have been thinking this way. Yeah, I've
Exactly.
already been that way about Stormlight going forward. Like, I have all these theories for Stormlight 5, and I was telling Kyle from Read by Kyle the other day, and he's like, "That's not gonna be a thing." I was like, "We'll see, Kyle. We'll see."
Watch me laugh.
Oh my gosh. And I even said to him, I was like, "I hope I'm wrong, like, because this is not something I want to see, but
Yes.
I still think it's gonna happen."
My toxic trait is that I aggressively try to guess the ending, and if I get it right, I'm mad. I'm like, "That wasn't a good book. I could
Same
guess it."
way. I am the exact same way. When I read Way of Kings, this was my problem. I was like, "Oh, it's just gonna end like this, and this is who's gonna be the bad guy, and blah 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 blah." And it was exactly what I predicted. And I was so bothered by this that I didn't read Words of Radiance for like 8 months. I was like, "No, it's garbage. I'm never going back to that."
Yes! Right?
Oh
And then
my
too,
gosh.
also, I'll, like I'll guess, like, 5 different things throughout or
Yep.
more throughout the series of the book, and then I'll just pretend like those other guesses didn't happen,
They
and I'm
didn't
like, "I
exist.
guessed it! I guessed
Yeah.
it! That was bad." I'm trying to
Now
do better.
held somewhat accountable because I've been messaging Kyle and Bookborn through my Sanderson foray, and I'm like, these are all of my predictions. So there is a direct record of all the things that I
And then you start as video evidence, but blot out the wrong stuff.
exactly just
Look, I guessed
redacted,
everything.
redacted. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so funny. Like there was, oh man, what was it? My husband read First Law before I did, and when I got into the second book, I was like, okay, this is what I'm predicting. And I just spewed like all these things at him for the second and third book. And he looked at me and he's like, some of what you said is right and some of what you said is wrong. Good luck. And I was like, so I'm just, I mean, like, it's one of those things that I want to read through it and find out, but simultaneously, it's that like competitiveness in me where I'm like, well, I got some of it right. So clearly, it's definitely these things. And then I just decided in my brain which ones were the correct ones and they weren't.
Sometimes I'll come up with a theory that I'm so sure about that I'm like, this is factual. No one can tell me it's wrong. And then as I read, I'm getting irritated because I'm like, I know I'm right. So I'm already annoyed that it's going to go the predictable route.
Yeah.
And then I'm wrong. And then I'm like, wait, that was great.
That's so funny. Okay. So after Mistborn, did you then jump into more Cosmere stuff, or did that you just start saying, okay, what are other fantasy authors that I want to start reading?
I was so inexperienced with fantasy. Like I had read Harry Potter growing up and I had read Aragon growing up, but I didn't read like I hadn't gotten into beyond middle grade fantasy.
Sure.
Or I guess Aragon is YA. But anyway, um I was so inexperienced with fantasy that I had already been on Booktube for like a year before I read Mistborn. And so
Mm,
I just asked for recommendations from my subscribers. What else do I need to read like
okay.
this? So I read A Darker Shade of Magic and I didn't like it. And then I read The Lies of Locke Lamora and I thought it was okay. And then I read a bunch of other fantasy books and then came back to Lies. And then it became my personality trait. The only one.
Uh, that's so funny. I love how a book can kind of hit at the right time for you.
Yeah.
Or
I
it's
just
just
wasn't
like,
ready for it yet.
yeah.
I
I mean,
wasn't I
I get
wasn't
that.
mature enough in my fantasy love.
I get it though, because I look back on certain books and I'm like, yeah, that didn't land the first time. And then the second time I'm like, well, let me tell you. This is now
Yes.
a core part of my identity. So I'm gonna share this with you whether you like it or not.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
So, being of obsessive nature,
Yes.
sister,
Yeah.
what do you have other passions like that? Or are you like, "Okay, I can have one thing that takes over my life, so books are my thing."
Oh, that's a tough question. So I was a history major. So
Mhm.
that for me was a big thing for a long time where I was like, let me tell you all about the Roman Empire. Like everyone should know about it and how important they were because we have running water because of them. And we're just
You were the
like,
TikTok meme.
I was that person. So that was a big thing for a long time. But really, any kind of nerdum thing, that's kind of always just been a big part of my person. So gaming for me growing up was a really big thing. And none of my female friends were gamers. So that took until my late teens to really to find other women that gamed. And when I did, I was like, oh, you guys exist too. Like this is so great. And I actually met my husband through World of Warcraft. So like
Yeah.
gaming was like a big part of my life. And that was very much a thing for me for a really long time. And love film and television. Like it's very similar to me to like a good book series. If I find a good television series, I'm like, what kind of emotions is it evoking in me? Is the storytelling good? Is the presentation good? And I just tell everyone, I'm like, you guys need to, stop what you're doing and just do this forever so we can all talk. Because I just love sharing what I love with other people, whether or not they love it. My hope is that one day they will love it too. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's
It's
okay.
really fun, though, to listen to someone who's passionate about something, even if you're not passionate about it. Just
Mhm.
listening to someone excitedly tell you about something they
Yeah,
love is wonderful.
I know. So, do you do that with anything other than?
Do I force my excitement on other people? Yeah,
Yes. What?
everything.
Everything? I love it.
Anything I'm excited about.
That's generally
I
my
stop
husband makes
people
fun of
on
me
the
for this.
street to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about it.
My husband makes fun of me for this. Like, anytime an event is getting really close and I get super excited, it's all I can talk about. And he's like, I know. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't know. And I just get
Gosh, me
so
too.
hyped
I
and
know.
yeah,
Yeah,
overexcited.
me too. I'm like, I'm really excited about this thing we're gonna do, and Corey's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
you told me.
I know. That's the thing. He hears it once and he's like, it's great. And I'm like, and now I'm going to tell you 49 more times before it actually happens.
Yes,
Or
yes,
like
yes.
my thing recently, which drives him absolutely nuts, is when I'm reading a book or a series that I know he will absolutely never read. And I'm like, these are all the reasons it's so great. And I'll just come out of nowhere. Like, we'll be talking about what we're going to have for dinner. And I'm like, and then I just start regaling him with information. And he's like, yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know. So I take what I can get.
Yeah, if they'll listen, then that's nice. Corey is a very
Yeah.
gracious listener. If I'm excited and I wanna shout, then he but, I mean, I do it too, just to be
Yeah.
clear. When he goes on one of his watch rants, "Look at this new watch I found. Look at how cool it is. Look at all these let me tell you about all the history about it." And I'm like, "Okay, alright. It looks like all the other ones you showed me, but yes, I'll
Yeah.
listen."
See, this has been Josh lately with chess, and he'll come at me and he's like, I researched all these chess openings, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm so glad for you. Like, I will listen to you talk about this. And then in
Exactly.
return, you will listen to me blabber on about whatever it is that day that I've decided is the new greatest thing of my existence.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Speaking of which,
Yes,
you're gonna watch the Avatar live action, eh?
I am. Yes. Are you going to watch it?
Of course I am.
Yeah.
Avatar is my favorite show. I will watch anything,
I
any content that they
know,
give
but you
me.
have said you're not a big TV watcher in
It's
general,
true.
correct?
It's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to really, really care about the thing to actually watch something on it, but I do really care about this thing.
So are you kind of approaching it the same way that you did with One Piece in the sense where it's like, I'm happy it's being made regardless of whether or not it's exactly what I'm hoping for or not.
Yep.
It's just cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just if it sucks, then I get to make fun of it, and if it's great, then I get to love it, and if it's
Mm,
not, then it's something I watched. I mean, it's like the original is there. I don't
yes.
it's something. It's a thing.
Yes.
So whatever.
So how did you come to anime and manga in general? Like at what point in your reading journey did that happen or how did anime come about for you?
Yeah, so I still don't watch a lot of anime, but manga was I had been getting recommendations for a long time from commenters saying, "I really think that you would like manga as well."
Mhm.
And I really did try. I really did try. And it took me a long time to finally find a series that clicked with me, and I tried a
Yeah,
lot of big like the big ones, the ones that should be good
sure.
entry points. And I don't know. I couldn't connect with it until One Piece, and then I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it now." And
Yeah.
now I'm happy to read many series, but it
Mhm.
just took me a long time to get into it. But it was just commenters that were like, "You would probably like these stories too. You like
That's
stories.
cool.
These are stories."
That's so neat. Yeah. I really, for some reason, had this very pretentious opinion where I was like, well, manga is not like real books. So
Sure.
why would I read that? And then I was like, everyone on Booktube is talking about manga. Like it was this hidden secret from the rest of the world that only Booktube knew. Like all these great fantasy stories were in manga. And I was like, what is happening here? What am I missing
It did.
out
It kinda
on?
took over.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting to see this kind of transition of people that read high epic fantasy also simultaneously very much share their love of manga. And I've really loved seeing that from a bunch of different people. My first exposure to it, oddly enough, was from a professor of mine during my undergrad. And his specialty is apocalypticism. He was like, manga, like such good modern representations of apocalypticism. And I was like, well, that's weird. And that was my first introduction to it. And I was like, well, he knows what he's talking about and it's great. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's kind of taking over in different ways for different people and what resonates with them and what clicks with them. And I'm hoping to keep reading more this year. I am going to start One Piece pretty soon to kind of keep up with
The live action.
yeah, well, not the
Mhm.
live action, but the chats you guys are gonna be doing because I wanna
Oh,
follow
yeah, yeah.
along
Awesome.
with that because I'll feel
It'll
like
be fun.
I'm adjacent.
You'll be able to you can send me Voxers shouting at me
Right? Like,
when
"Oh,
you get to certain traumatic scenes, and you'll be like, "What are you doing?"
I know. So I'll have someone to shout my feelings at, which is great because
Yes.
yeah, I don't Josh doesn't read any manga, so I'm kind of alone on that island in my
Yeah,
house.
Corey doesn't either.
It's
He's
a
tried. He picked up one series, he was like, "I think I would like this." And then he opened it, and he's like, "Nope," and just closed it right back up. I'm like, "You didn't does that count as trying?" He's
That's
like, "I
so
can't
funny.
do it."
Is he a big reader in general? Because
No,
I know
no.
he's read some Sanderson, right? Like, you guys have done Stormlight videos
Yeah, I
together
mean,
and
he
stuff?
reads Yeah, he reads nonfiction, but as far as fantasy, he's only read, like, a handful that
Okay.
he's gotten into, yeah. He's
So
not a
would
big
you
reader, he never has been.
it's not for everybody, as much as we wanna yell our feelings at them, but,
Mm.
it's all good. So would you say now more so that you are predominantly a fantasy reader, or do you still kind of feel that you're more of a mixed genre
I
reader?
definitely read more fantasy than anything else,
Yeah.
but yeah, I try to keep it varied. I mean, I think I read a lot of different things, I just fantasy dominates for sure.
Mhm. And why do you think that is now for someone that didn't really like it at first? Like, what was the switch that you were like, "Oh, yeah, this is now part of my personality?"
I have never grown up. I am still stuck in my head, wanting to ride dragons, wanting, uh, elemental magic to be real, and, like, that that wonder is
Mhm.
still very alive in my mind, so if a book can tap into that wonder, then I'm like, "Ah, this is it. This is
I
what I
hear
want."
you. I hear you because I love for me, falling in love with the new world, like, that is really what gets me super excited, and it was interesting because I was on Tori's channel a couple months ago, and she played this really mean game with me where she, like, made me drop things or keep things, and she was like, "Okay, high magic or low magic?" And I was like, and I was like,
What'd
"I
you
don't know
pick?
what to choose." I kept low magic, but it hurt me to do so, but I I read some really great low magic books last year, which I feel probably influenced that decision. But it's just the world building in fantasy that is so intriguing to me, and how there's always this conversation, right? That's kind of cyclical, and that no story is a new story, and we're just recycling material, but we're doing it in different ways. And it's so interesting to me to see, like, dragons, for example. It's like, okay, how can ABCD each take on the world of dragons? How do they present that? What is that world, that magic? Like, what's their spin on it? And fantasy, it's not to say that other genres aren't inventive and creative, because all writing is inventive and creative, but fantasy is just so layered. And I feel that it really doesn't get the due that it is deserved because of how much is being created from scratch in these worlds. And I just think that it's so wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think fantasy, even though there's a lot of dark fantasy, there's a lot of I mean, everything has a million different subgenres, but fantasy
Yeah.
can invoke my wonder like no other,
Yeah.
series can, and, like, sci-fi can invoke my dread like no other genre
Ooh,
can. And
yeah.
literary fiction connects me more with people and with, like, the real world issues that
Mhm.
more than any other genre can, and none of these things are isolated. All of these genres can do all of those things,
Mhm.
but I don't know, specific things I feel like I go to certain genres for,
That makes perfect sense,
and
yeah.
I look for wonder the most.
Mhm.
So it's where I go the most often.
No, I hear you. That makes perfect sense. I never even really thought about it that way, but it's like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a specific feeling. Like, I'm
Yeah.
generally gonna land in one camp or another.
What
So
specific feeling do you look for when you read?
so it depends I'm such a mood reader, which is really problematic for me because, like, I'm the worst to do a buddy read with because I'm like, "Oh, am I feeling that? No." But it I really love the idea of mysticism. Like, that for me is just like, I love that type of feeling and being enthralled. Like, that for me is so magical. I'm like, where I step into a world where I know nothing, and I'm like, oh, it's all brand new. Like, that to me is so exciting. So I love that. And it could be
Yeah.
through portal fantasy, or it can be through just exploring different parts of a world. Like, I love exploring. So I think that for
Mm.
me is the big thing. So any kind of hero's journey typically is going to be like all about that for me, which I really love. But I love just being in books that have really unique feeling. Like,
Yes.
locations have unique feelings, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm a
Um
big settings reader too.
yeah, I love settings. And yes, as an example, so example wise, like, Lies of Lockamore, for example, was for me, I felt like very Pirates of the Caribbean-esque in terms of setting. I was like, oh, it feels like it could be like maybe 1600s, like on an island, which is very, very neat. Last year when I read The Lines of Our Song, I really loved the settings in that. Yes, Evie, I know I need to read this character. But
I
I
can hear
love
her
that.
saying it. I
I
love that I can
know,
hear
I
Evie anytime
know,
she types in
Evie.
caps.
Oh man, but I love that. So that for me has probably been the biggest thing, but recently it's really been character stuff. Like I'm finding more so than ever I'm a really big character reader rather than plot, and that happened when I read Joe Abercrombie for the first time. So that was
Mm.
really the switch for me. But
I
how
think
about you?
Joe I think Joe is the one that really solidified, or one of the first ones that solidified to me that I was a character reader as well.
Mhm.
Because when gosh, so I've always been a reader. One thing that Booktube has been a gift to me on is helping me to analyze why I like, why I don't
Yes.
like what I like, and learn how to articulate it.
Mhm.
So, when I went into Booktube, I didn't know any of that, and I had no idea how to communicate why I liked or didn't like something. All I knew was to say, "I liked it. I didn't like it."
Yeah.
And and a lot of it came from comments pushing me and challenging me and being
Mm.
like, "Why? What?" And being dissatisfied with the way I was
Yeah.
reviewing, which forced me to really have to think harder about it. I don't remember where I was going with that. Oh, yeah, Joe. So, Joe Abercrombie, when I was reading from him and I was trying to figure out how to articulate why what he was doing was so different to
Mhm.
me, I realized that it was that his characters were so real, but
Yes.
also so complicated, but
Yes.
also I understood them, but I didn't like what they were doing, and he just made me struggle with the characters, and I realized
Mhm.
how important that was to me as a reader.
Yes, I felt the same way because I went into my reads last year that I did no background research. Every read I did was blind. And
That's risky, but
it
yes.
was super risky because I also didn't DNF a single book.
Ah!
And I gave it to my husband first. I got him First Law for Christmas last year, and he breezed through it and he's like, "You're really gonna like it." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." So I kind of had a leg up of thinking like he knows me pretty well and he thinks I'm gonna like it, so I should be okay. And when I started reading and I got to the first Galacta chapter, I was like, oh, I'm so in. I was like, it could literally just be Galacta walking upstairs for 500 pages, and
Sucking
I'm
his
here
teeth
for that.
and complaining
Exactly.
about
I
the
was like,
stairs.
I'm so here for this. And it was the first time ever that I feel like I actually sat back and thought about a character's internal monologue because we don't get that as often as I feel like maybe we
Mm,
should. And that's really, I feel, a differentiating factor for him is that
mm,
you get to know the characters so much more intimately because of the fact that you're getting such an internal monologue and not just conversations, which I mean, conversations are, of course, inherently important to your characters and plot development and all that stuff. But I left those books being like, oh no, I intimately know these people.
are you
Maybe
gonna
not
read Age of
Pharaoh.
Madness?
I have one book to go and then I'm in Age of Madness.
Okay. Age
So
of Madness made me say, First Law, it's okay. Even though
I
I previous it was in my top series, now I'm like, because Age of
yeah,
Madness was so good.
that's what everyone has said, and I'm super excited because I've heard that the female characters in Age of Madness are excellent, which I'm really excited for, but also, like, I love Glocta so much. Like, Glocta is probably my favorite character ever written. I love him. So it's gonna be hard for me to top Glocta, but I'm
Mhm,
going into it with an open mind that
mhm.
it is possible.
That's
So
good.
it's okay. Do you have a favorite character? Is there like one particular character that you're like, oh yeah, tops forever,
Oh my goodness. From First Law or just in
or in
general?
general? In
Oh,
general.
Jean. I don't know why you asked that question.
That's fair. That's fair. And how about from First Law?
Oh, it's probably Glokta from First Law
Yeah,
as well. Yeah,
yeah.
he's tough to beat. He's an extraordinary character.
My husband is Team Giselle. He's hardcore Team Giselle.
Really?
Yeah, and was after the first book. Like, he
Really?
in with Giselle immediately. Yeah, it was because the only thing I knew about First Law is that people kept saying Glocta and great. And I was like, whoever this Galacta person is. And I went into this thinking, I was like, maybe Galacta's the hero. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, he is.
Right?
That seems right.
And I was like, okay. So when he finished the blade itself, I was like, oh, so is Galacta your favorite character? And he was like, no. And I was like, interesting. And he's like, I'll tell you after you read the first book. And I was like, okay, I read it. And he goes, it was Jazal. And I was like, are you for real? I was like, Jazal? Come on. And yeah, he was just a hardcore Jazal fan from book 1 all the way through, which I like Jazal. I think he's fine, but he's no Galacta.
Okay. Who's your favorite Mistborn character?
Favorite Mistborn character. Okay, I love Tensoon, like hardcore love.
Really? Oh my golly, that's my favorite. Nobody loves Tensoon.
Yes, I love Tensoon.
We are twins.
Yeah, it's happening.
We live on an island and we share a hut.
I'm fine with it because we'll just be excited all the time.
Now we have people to gush with about all our favorite books. Read Chest Story.
I love Tensoon so much. Yeah, Tensoon for me was like probably the solid part of Wall of Ascension and then the final book. I mean, like, I really enjoyed Sazed just for kind of him being Sazed. And I loved Breeze. I thought Breeze was so
Breeze is
funny.
amazing.
Yes, I was like, Breeze is hysterical.
So fun. Breeze and Spook are my husband's favorite in Mistborn.
Oh, interesting. Spook. Okay.
He named his Jeep Spook.
I love that for him. So here's my thing. When I read it, I was like, okay, Kelsier is meant to be super endearing, right? Like that's his purpose. Fine. Then I struggled a little bit with in the first book just because I wasn't the right age group for it. I felt like I just didn't connect with Vin. Like, I feel like
a traumatized girl.
she is. And I was like, I feel like if I had read this when I was 20 or 22 to 25, maybe I was like, I feel like I probably would have fallen in with Vin a lot sooner. Like, I really got on board with Vin in the later part of the series. But I love humor. So Breeze is that person for me that filled that void. And I actually really love Marsh. Like, I really love Marsh. So I was like, this is my little crew in and amongst the big crew. And Tensoon showing up, I was like, well, Tensoon, like, tops Tensoon. So yeah, I love him.
Big agree.
Yeah.
After the stream, I'll have to say more.
Is he your favorite overall Cosmere character or your favorite just favorite Mistborn character?
That's tough. I think Mbot might. No, it's still Tensoon. You asked Cosmere, you didn't ask Sanderson. So Mbot.
Yeah, I was like, that's not Cosmere.
You're right. I always just, when people say Cosmere, to me that translates Sanderson.
All inclusive of Sanderson. Yeah, I hear you.
I know I'm bad about that. So yeah, it's Tensoon, I think.
That's cool. I love Lightsong, like, deeply.
Really?
Yeah, Lightsong is probably my favorite Cosmere character. I love him.
No kidding. So why is that? Why number 1 for Lightsong?
He's so funny. So the concept to me of a god not believing in their own divinity is so funny. Like, I love that irony, and it just hits all the right notes for me. His sarcasm is so excellent. I love his banter with Blushweaver. I just like him pretending to be a detective in Warbreaker is so great. Like, he's such a good foil for so many people. And I love his character arc, like, so much. I think he's so great. And then next to him is Nightblood. Like, those are probably my top 2.
Nightblood is incredible. He does his sentient objects well.
So well. I mean, Nightblood and Stick, really, like, it's a hard choice.
And Mbot.
Yes. So those are probably my top 3 if you then chuck Tensoon into the mix. But yeah, I have a soft spot for Lightsong just because I read Mistborn first and then I jumped into Warbreaker. No, I'm lying. I did Mistborn, Elantris, and then Warbreaker. Those were my first Sanderson reads. And while there are funny parts of Mistborn and Elantris, the humor wasn't super in line with my type of humor. And then Lightsong showed up and I was like, check. Like this is my type of humor. So, and then Nightblood, of course, is just absolutely hilarious. And I was like, yes, these
Sanders
two. So good.
Sanderson's humor is very hit or miss for me.
Yeah.
For you as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. He has some characters that I think are so funny, and then he has other characters that I'm like, "You really are trying hard to be funny."
Yes. There are a couple of characters that I actively have ruined books for me where I'm like, no, if you want to just give me more light song, like that would be great. Uh,
Yeah. I have a couple that I'm a hater about as well.
that's fair. I also just recently read Fourth Wing and I loved it. So I think Warbreaker would be a great choice. I would absolutely recommend Warbreaker. So yeah, you should definitely do that. But yeah, I love Light Song. He's one of the best.
Did you say you loved Fourth Wing?
I did. I actually did. I had a great time with it. It was
There's
so
been a lot of people popping up lately that have been loving it.
yeah, I mean, my whole thing was I was of the opinion because the algorithm kept telling me it was really terrible that I was like, oh, well, it's obviously really terrible and it's not up my alley at all. And I was like, you know what? My best friends read it and they were like, we think you might actually like this. And I was like, well, you've only known me for like 25 years. What do you really know? You know, like,
The internet knows
I'm not
better.
gonna like this. And then I was like, well, fine, I'll read it. And I just breezed through both books in like 4 days. I was like, this is so fun. It's one of
Yay.
those stories that I'm like, it's easy, it's just nice and easy and fun and light. And I was like, cool, I'm here for this. I had a really great time with it. But yeah,
Good.
it's not for everybody, but I enjoyed it.
So funny. I feel like from the outside, I haven't read it. I don't plan to read it. From the outside, it seems like it was so loved. And
Mhm.
then here's my perspective. It was so loved by the correct groups, by the people who were supposed to love it.
Yep.
Then it got so big that
Yes.
people outside of the correct group, people who like this is obviously not your taste. You're obviously not going to like this.
Yeah.
Read it and then dunked on it. And now it's come back around to finding its correct audience again. And now
Yeah,
people are like, no, this is a great time. I'm the right audience for this. And I have enjoyed it. This is correct for me.
exactly. And that's the thing. I feel like whenever there's a really big explosion of popularity for something, there's going to be the antithesis movement that erupts in,
That's so true.
to counteract that. And I mean, I am never of the opinion that a book has to work for everybody because
Yeah.
that's just unrealistic and no
Yeah.
one's taste except ours apparently are exactly the same. So apparently you'll really love Fourth Wing if you decide to give it a try.
Well, now you're the only person I can trust.
Right? So there you go. But it's one of those things that I'm like, if they want to love it, let them love it. Like it doesn't how does that affect your person? It doesn't.
I will say,
So
I don't think there's anything wrong with making a rant review. I don't think there's anything wrong with
no.
disliking a book. Live your life. But it is funny when you see waves of like, it's trendy to love. Now it's trendy to hate. Now it's
Yeah.
trendy to love again. And it's like, how does this wave even happen?
I know. It's so funny. So like I'm gonna be making a video about it in a couple days, so I'm not gonna be like dishing my feelings on it. But I read all of Akatar last week because I finished Fourth Wing and I was like, well, now I want to do investigative light song journalism here and like really
No,
delve
you
into
didn't. You just
oh yeah.
wanted more romanticy and you
Here's
lived
the
your
thing.
best life.
And this was my best friends once again because they kept saying when I finished Fourth Wing, they were like, "Oh, well, now you have to read Akatar." I was like, "Do I?" And they were like, "Yes," and I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll read it." And I'm gonna record hopefully tomorrow and get it out in a couple days.
Yes or
But
no?
great time. It was super
Okay, so
fun.
our taste isn't exactly alike because I
Not
did read the
exactly
first
like
ACOTAR book and I hated it.
so the first one, I will say, weakest of the bunch by far. It's a setup book for the
Mhm,
rest of the series, is how I
mhm.
felt about it. But also I knew things about book one. Like I didn't go into the series totally blind in the way that
Sure.
I did with other stuff. But either way, it's one of those things that I'm like, read what you want. Like love what you want. I don't really care. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Did you talk to Tori about ACOTAR? Because I feel like if you just
Did
streamed
not.
with Tori and then you saved your ACOTAR talk for me, she's gonna be so mad.
I did not talk to her about it because literally I finished reading them 2 days ago.
Okay, I'm still
Yeah,
gonna tell on you.
that's fine. Tori, you can come at me. But yeah, it's good. I'm trying to branch out, I feel like, because I've kind of gotten into this mindset that I'm like, oh, I only read this type of fantasy, or this type of book or this type of story. And I feel like that's held me back and been a hindrance in a few ways over the last
Yeah,
few years where I'm like, well, maybe I've changed and,
yeah.
maybe my tastes have adapted and changed and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to be a bit more explorative with the stuff
Good for
that I
you.
read. And you know what? I found some stuff that I really love. And for the first time ever this year, I allowed myself to DNF things. And I was like, cool, I can then move along and find things that I genuinely do want to read.
You should talk to Brittany. You should have her on sometime and talk to her because she loves all that romantasy.
I'll have to get her
And
hot
she's
take.
into like the big epic fantasy too. So I bet you guys would have a lot to talk about.
Probably, yeah. You'll have to give me all her information when we're
I'll
on.
do it.
Yeah. So, what are you looking
Go away,
forward
Andrew.
to reading?
Sorry. What was that?
Is there something right now that you're really looking forward to reading, that's on your list or that you've started?
Yeah, maybe you'll read this with me. So I don't read romance. I don't like romance, but there's this romance book that it's like, I don't know. Hold on. Am I doing a good job? 1 second. Let me find what it's called.
I give you full permission for this.
Where is it? Oh, there it is.
Hello, Andrew.
It's called Projections.
Okay.
It's by S.E. Porter.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me pull it up so that I can accurately. Projections book. Okay. Love may last a lifetime, but in this dark historical fantasy, the bitterness of rejection endures for centuries. So I think what it is okay. So there is a guy who he seduces women and then kills them. And then this woman, after she's dead, after she's died, she now seeks vengeance. Like she becomes obsessed with him and he's a sorcerer. So she becomes obsessed with seeking vengeance over her death is what I think it is. And it's a
Okay.
gothic story, but it's also
Okay.
it's like romantic, but it's also like historical and gothic and sorcery. And I don't know. I think I'm gonna hate it, but I might love it. And I'm excited
So
about it.
I would try that with you. Based off the
Really?
sounds of it, I will also hate it.
Oh, good. We
I-
can hate it together.
That's fine. So yeah, that's not typically what I would lean into, but I'm willing to give it a go.
Yay! It's the thing is, it's outside of my comfort zone, but it might work. Like it might get me there, or I might just despise it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would have to be one or the other.
Yeah. I
I don't feel
really
like there's gonna be much middle ground on that
yeah.
one. But that's
It
okay.
releases next week.
Ooh,
So
okay.
disrupt your entire TBR for me.
I literally don't have one.
Oh, that's right. You're a
Yeah.
mood reader. Well,
Yeah,
then that works out perfectly.
that's the thing. I will occasionally I need to know well in advance though. So when I agree to do a buddy read with someone, I'm like, okay, I need to know 3 months out. I can mentally start prepping to read this book.
I do this to Andrew all the time where I'm like, I don't have a buddy read for this particular book. Andrew, read it now. And then
Yeah,
he's like, yes, I will do that. When should we start? And then I ignore his text for 3 weeks. And then I'm like, now. I'm actually doing that to him right now. He asked me when we're going to start our next one. And I just haven't
man. See,
replied. Hey, Andrew.
Joanna is the one that buddy reads things with me, and she's very kind to continue to do this with me because honestly, my behavior does not deserve it. I either read it so quickly or I'm the last to finish. There's no
Same.
middle ground.
Same.
She and I did The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell a few weeks ago. And I was like, okay, I'm starting. And then 3 days later, I was like, I'm done. And then with last year, we did God Gabrielle K. And she was like, everyone else is finished. I was like, I'm so sorry. I still have 2/3 of this book left. So I'm that person that I'm either one. But we're supposed to do Ghana in April. So I will likely start that in the middle of March. And that way I will probably finish at the same time as everybody
And
else.
then you'll be like, "I'm so sorry. I got into it and I read it all in a day,
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
a month early."
Yeah, it's just I'm not great at that. So that's the thing. Like if it's something I'm super excited about, like if someone wanted to say to me, like, "Oh, do you want to buddy read Stormlight 5?" I'd be like, heck yes, because I know I'm gonna read that the second it comes out. But when it's something that's been out already for like a really long time and I'm like interested, but it's not my personality yet, I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. So
Very understandable.
it's
Yeah.
fine. But people keep
Yeah.
telling me I need to read things, and I'm like, I know, and I'll get there.
I'll do it when I do it.
Yeah, I'm not great about it.
So you would I would assume, the age-old question, is your personality a cat or a dog? I'm
Oh,
gonna go
it's a
ahead and
cat.
guess you're a cat. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Me too.
There is zero question about that. I like being inside too much. So even though I love being outside as well. But yeah, cat.
We're giving Evie anxiety with our
I'm
habits.
sorry, Evie. But I mean, at least we're being honest. So,
I think I'm a lot like that too, though. When I start a book, I either love it and then it's like, this is what I do now. I read this book.
yeah.
Or I'm like, okay, this will be a slow plod, and I just like take my time. So
Uh-huh.
I'm
I'm
very similar in how I
So are
conduct
you a
myself.
binger? Because I am a total binger. If I
Oh,
find a
you mean like
series
for
I
series?
like, yeah.
No.
Okay, I am.
No,
So
I have to
we have
force
found a
myself to
difference
finish
here.
series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a problem where if a whole series is available and I like it, it's I'm there that's what I'm doing.
That's
Like
what
there's
happened to
nothing else.
ACOTAR.
Yep. I mean, I did that in September of last year. I did all of Mistborn era 2. That was my September. I was just like, cool, this is happening now. I read the whole Cosmere last year, except for Sunlight Man and Dawn Shard. Those were the only two I didn't read last year.
Have you read them now?
I have still yet to read Sunlight Man. I started it and I really wasn't vibing with it. So I was like, I'll come back to this before Stormlight 5. But I did read Dawn Shard.
So
So
you pulled a Joanna and you read all the Sanderson and then you got are you burnt out?
no, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Well, then you
Yeah.
pulled Bookborn. You just read
Yeah.
all the Sanderson and then now
Yeah.
we wait.
Now we wait. Yeah. I actually then reread Warbreaker in January. So
Of course you did.
it was like, yeah. And I mean, it was less than a year since the last time I read it, but I was like, you know what? I might reread this every January and just like start my year on something that I really love because it's delightful and I super enjoy it. So yeah, it's good. Are you a big rereader or do you kind of, yeah.
I love rereading. I do a lot less of it now.
Mhm.
But I'm always like my favorite books, especially if I have books that are tied to memories.
Mhm.
Like I read Fishman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier for the first time, and it's my favorite Daphne du Maurier. It was like my favorite book of the year that year. I read it for the first time in Puerto Rico. And so
Mhm.
now that book is tied to Puerto Rico. So the next
Mhm.
time I go there, I'm bringing that book and I'm going to reread it by the ocean.
That's so funny. I get
Mm.
that way with music. If music is on when I'm reading, it's automatically associated with that book for me going forward. And my daughter went through this and is still in an Ed Sheeran phase, but one particular song when I was reading Mistborn. So whenever I hear that song, I'm like, oh, it's the Final Empire. Like it's like instantaneous that I am transported to Scadrial. I'm like, cool.
So your daughter's quite young and
Mhm.
she's really into Ed Sheeran.
So very tangential, non-related story, but yes. When she was in utero and this song would come on the radio, she didn't kick a whole lot, but she would go absolutely nuts when that song came on. And there
Interesting.
was a few times in my later part of my pregnancy that she wasn't moving at all. So we were actually legitimately worried and had to go to the hospital, and they would play that song at the hospital to get her moving. And it worked. So when
Wow.
she was born, we were like, you know what? We're gonna just like see if she recognizes it. Instantaneous admiration for that song. Like the song came on and she would just be like looking around as to like where it came from. So she has
Interesting.
this weird thing since before she was born for Ed Sheeran. It's oh my god, what is the name of that song? It's not Bad Habits. It's the other one where his face is on a train in the music video. Oh, this is so bad. Josh, if you're listening, can you tell me the name of that song? This is gonna really, really bother me now. Of course, now that I need to remember the name, I can't think of it. Okay, hold on. Celestial became the other one that she really started listening to. And this one, Shivers. That's the one. It was Shivers. So yeah, it started with Shivers and then it became Bad Habits and then Celestial, which was his Pokemon song. And this became like our holy trinity of songs in our house for about 8 months. We could
That's so
only
funny.
listen to these 3 songs, but she loves music. She's super musical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My daughter is huge into music as well.
yeah.
She's 4, but she's just like, we get in the car and she's like, can we have a song on? And if she's being wild, we'll turn on music and she's like, okay, all right, I'm time to sit and listen to music. But my son's not so, I mean, he likes music, but it's not the same intensity. But when he was a baby, he didn't sleep and he didn't like he tried to kill me. That's not true. But he didn't sleep well. But there was one song that if we turned it on, then instantly he would stop whatever he was doing and he'd come for snuggles. And then we could get him to fall asleep to that song. So we just played that song every nap time, every bedtime. It was the only way we got him to sleep. And it was Tennessee Whiskey by Chris Stapleton. Like the songs that they choose.
Oh, I know. So weird. Cause like my husband is not a pop music fan. Like I love 90s music in general. Like that's kind of where my jam is. And my husband grew up loving rap and hip hop. So he'll lean into that genre. And I'm like,
so Ed Sheeran, naturally, he loves.
Ed Sheeran is where we landed. I played so much Outkast when Girlfriend was in utero, and she was just like, no, it's Ed Sheeran. I'm like, all right, cool. So that's what we've landed on, and it's fine. Like, I am grateful to have a song or few songs that she's just like, and we'll zone out and chill out. Lately, it's been ABBA. So we're just going through the stages of pop.
Sure. Sure. Why not?
She's living her best dancing queen life, but it's been fine. And yes, Kyle, you did walk into an Ed Sheeran discussion, but we were talking about Warbreaker not that long ago, so you're late.
At least it's not Let It Go.
That also happened. There was a lot of the Frozen soundtrack in our house.
Oh my goodness.
Do you find it hard to stay in a mood when you're doing like Patreon reads and things like that? Is that difficult for being a mood reader?
So I'm not a mood reader.
Okay. Oh, okay. You're not. Okay.
I'm either a binger or I take things slow, but okay. I'm like super structured. I plan out my reading 3 to 4 months in advance. Pretty much know exactly what I want to read. Now I will every now and then randomly find a book that I'm like, oh, just kidding. This is the only thing I want to read. So this is what I'm doing now, which is super fun because so the way I plan out my reading is I say, okay, this is what I'm reading this month. And then I create channels on my Discord for every single book so that people can join in whatever book they want to read. And everything I read is a buddy read. So that's super fun when I randomly just make a new channel and I'm like, hi, I'm reading this right now. And like the people that try to keep up with me are like, what are you doing?
Yeah, you're ruining everything. We need structure here.
Yeah. So that's the chaos side of it. But for the most part, I'm a really structured reader and I can stick with things. The only problem is that I am really comfortable with DNFing. So that's kind of annoying for people that are like, okay, I'm picking my buddy reads with Merphy this month. I'm picking these 2. And then I DNF one of them and they're like, okay, well, cool. I guess I'm reading this alone. Like that sucks.
That's so interesting. I think because my academic reading was so structured that I have now gone the exact opposite way and done a 180 where I'm like, it's only things that I'm in the mood for. And I'm okay with like planning things like Tigana and stuff months in advance, just so I know there's a deadline for things, because otherwise I'm like, it might take me 6 years, but we'll get there in the end. But yeah, it's really just become very much a mood thing. I don't know when that shift
Let it
happened.
be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just enjoy what you're reading. It doesn't
It
matter.
is. It's good. And that's the thing. Like, I, when I was going through Stormlight last year, I kept telling myself, I was like, you need to take breaks and read other books, like after you finish the Stormlight book, because it's so big, right? And I was just like, I got through Words of Radiance and I was like, I guess I'll read something else. And I picked up like 5 books and I read probably a chapter or 2 in each book. And I was like, no, Oathbringer. Just went like straight through. I just can't help it. If I find my thing, I dig my
Get your
claws into
Dalinar
it.
book. Just
I loved Oathbringer so much. Like, I am in the minority where I'm like 5-star book, Oathbringer, loved it.
I mean, I think Oathbringer has some of the best scenes in the series,
hmm
but it also it's probably my third favorite of the 4 so far.
Okay, it's my second. But
Words of Radiance is your number 1.
oh, without
Words of Radiance
question.
is everybody's number
It's
1.
it's fire, that book. It's
It's a 10 out
so
of
good.
10.
It's
It's
so
you
good.
can't top it.
No, and the thing was, right, like I had a really awkward reading experience with Way of Kings. Like I just didn't jive well with Way of Kings. So I had that 8-month break and then I came down with COVID and was just house ridden for like a month and was like, you know what I need right now is a 1,200-page book. And
Obviously.
it's sitting on
About
my shelf.
war.
So I'm gonna go pick it up. And as soon as I saw that the prologue was Yasna, I was like, I'm here for this. And literally the first sentence until the last sentence of that book, I was like, the whole thing is perfection. I loved it. I mean, there was one little section that I would have gotten rid of, and that's Lift. but other than
People
Lift,
are so mean to Lift.
well, that's
She's
because
awesome.
no, she's not. But it's a love bomb chat, so I'll only say nice things.
Lift is who I want to be when I grow up. I love her
Oh,
so much.
I'm sorry, Merphy. I'm so sorry, but no.
Whatever. I don't even care.
No, but I love that whole book. Like, it was just one of those things. I had texted Bookborn and I was like, hey, I'm dying and I started this book. So I'm really excited and get ready for like 15 million messages about this book because I'm going to have so many opinions. And she was like, you have zero context for this, but be prepared for these things. And she listed the duel, the chasms, and the end. Like, that's all she said. She was like, now go read. And I remember I got to the duel scene and I was like, oh, this has got to be it. Like, this is the scene. Like, this is what she was telling me. It's going to be so great and so exciting. And I was so hyped and so excited that I was like pacing around my living room as I was reading it. And I was just like, like, and got so invested in it that I put it down. I sent her a bunch of messages. I sent Kyle some messages. I went and I like started talking at my husband who had zero context for what I was saying. And I was just like, I was so enamored with that book. And then
Yep.
when I got to, which I was really interested by this because when I read Way of Kings, I hated Shalyn with like a fiery passion in my soul. I was like, she is the worst. Like, no. And then when I got to Words of Radiance, I was like, I'm so excited what's happening to Shalyn. It was so
She was a
great.
lot better in Words of Radiance. It's
So
true.
much better.
And then
So
she
much better.
continued to be terrible after that.
So much better. But I was genuinely so fascinated as to how I could do such a shift on a character like that from
Mm.
one book to the next. I was like, this is really interesting to me, just in terms of my reading preferences. You finished it 2 days after it came out. Good on you. It took me a week. And I thought I read that really quickly.
I think I got a month. So
Oh, man. But yeah, I loved that book. And then when we got into book 3 and it was Dalinar's book, I was like, yes, like love the Colin family.
are you so I know you're big into world building. Are you really into all the connections as well? Like you
I love
know it. You are. Okay. So you're like a
so
book born in that way.
yeah, but the thing was because I didn't know, like I knew the Cosmere existed when I started reading. I was like, okay, there's interconnected stuff, but I didn't know what was going to be interconnected. So that was really fun to pick up on certain things.
Yeah.
And I would start messaging Kyle in Bookborn again. And I was like, I'm pretty sure. And then just like, start spewing out my theories. And a couple of them were correct as to like who people were and what
Yeah.
connections were correct. And I was like, this is so fun. But this is also now part of my problem whenever I read another book that's not a Sanderson book, where I'm like, oh, I don't need to be reading for a million clues to like fill in the gaps here. Like you
Yeah.
can just chill.
See, I'm like an outcast Sanderson fan in that I want to read everything he writes, but all the tiny little intricate details, like as far as starting the story here, leaving breadcrumbs, and then making it all,
Yeah.
culminate to something great. Of course, I want that. But all the
Yeah.
tiny little nuanced world building things, it's like, and that connects to that, and that does that, and that, like, that is so not me.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
so,
when it gets really complicated is a bit beyond me, but I love when I can figure out like who a character is. Like that to me is
yes,
really fun.
yes.
So like I really enjoyed that part of Oathbringer. I was like,
Hmm.
I know who you are. And like had one of those moments where I was just like, I see what you did here. And I
Yeah.
love that kind of thing. But yeah, if it's like in the minutia of it, I'm like, okay. Like I don't need that to enjoy a book, but I love, like you said, kind of the bigger
Yes.
aspects of it. Yeah,
Yes.
for
Two
sure.
of the people that I talk to the most about Sanderson are like the hyper extreme, like they'll ask questions and Sanderson's like, huh, okay. And then he'll like go off onto this side tangent and they follow him, like they get
Yeah.
it. And so
Mhm.
I'll talk to them about something and I'll ask a question. I'm like, so is this? And they're like, no. And then they'll like go off on this. I'm like, oh no, I don't, did I read that book? What are
Yeah.
you saying?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like they just know it.
There's been a few things with like heightenings and like shards and kind of and that kind of stuff where I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I hear you, but how much of this do I need to know?
Yeah, I recognize there are
Yeah.
words coming out of your mouth. I can identify
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I had gotten through probably 80% of the Cosmere and then watched a couple of Cosmere videos and I was like, I don't know some of these things and they're from books that I have read. So I was like, this is fine. Everything is fine. But it didn't damper my enjoyment of them at all. And I really did enjoy when I came across something that was interconnected and I was like, yeah. But really more so, exactly. You kind of just have this like little sense of pride as you're reading. But for me, really more so than anything else, I was like, oh, I know who you are. I know who you are. And I got really excited about that. Or when it was like blatantly obvious when like sentient things announce who they were. And I was like, yes. Those were all caps text to Bookborn. I was like, oh my gosh.
I'm so smart.
I was just so excited that I got more of certain characters and stuff like that. That for me, I think was the more fun thing where I was like, oh, when I really liked a character, I was like, I'm hopeful that there'll be a world hopper. Basically, that to me became really exciting.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it was always it's so funny, for so long, it was so fun to try to guess one specific character, like, "Okay, who is he in this book?" And I was
Mhm.
just like, "I'm here!"
Yeah, exactly. I have announced myself and except in Stormlight, where it's like I have a new name, and it's like okay,
Okay.
which is a whole other thing.
It is. So, outside of fantasy, what would you say is your favorite genre to read?
I really like historical fiction if it's done correctly. Augustus was one of my favorite books of the year last year and ever. Honestly, I loved Augustus so much. John Williams was just amazing with that book. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Stoner author.
yes, yeah. Which I haven't read yet, but I've been told that I need to. So, and I actually really like history books, like actual history books, because
Nerd.
yeah, I mean, I had to read them for so long. So, I mean, it's yeah, I was there you go, Evie. um, yes, it's so good, Kyle. You definitely should. Sell you on Augustus. Okay, so Augustus is probably the best historical fiction that I have read based on the fact that it is very accurate for what is happening historically during that time period. And John Williams did such a phenomenal job of each person having a very distinguishing voice in that story. And even though, because it's in an epistolary format, that was so important that you knew off the bat immediately who was speaking, who was writing a letter. And the character work in that book is, other than Abercrombie, probably the best character work that I've read in a book. Like, it's so, so good.
It was
And just,
nice of you to try to sell him on that, but the
yeah,
chat's already told him that
he
he
won't
can't
like
read
it.
it.
Well, fine. Well, you all suck.
You're, like, so passionately and
I
kindly
know, like,
explaining this, and the whole chat is like, "No, no."
I mean, if he wants to, I saw he, Andrew, it could be Akatar or Augustus. Like, make your choice.
Okay, what is the most, like, outside the box you didn't expect to like well, I guess you already told me it's Fourth Wing, isn't it?
Most recently, yeah, I would say that that's
Yeah.
probably what it's been. In terms of like ever though, ooh, that's hard. Um, I don't know. Like, I'm pretty open with stuff, honestly.
Kyle, I DNF all the time too, so make fun of me too. Sorry, you're open, that's good. It's good to be
Yeah,
open.
I'd have to think about it. How about you? Is there something that kind of has taken you?
Ow! Um, I think Discworld was a really big surprise for me.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Chess Story surprised me a lot. This is fantasy, but His Majesty's Dragon well, I guess Discworld is as well. His
Is,
Majesty's Dragon was a
is
big
that the
surprise for
Temporary
me.
series?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been
I
wanting to
read
get that.
I read Uprooted and I hated it so much that I didn't wanna touch another Naomi Novik book ever,
Yeah.
and I had this on my shelves and I was like, "I should like that, but I
Mhm.
won't because Uprooted." And so I read it to DNF it so I could get rid of it, and now
Mhm.
I love it so much.
I've been told by a few people, specifically, Ben from the channel Books with Genghis Khan. He's like, "Oh, I really think you would like Temeraire," and I was like, "Okay, I'll have to check it out." And I actually did have it on Libby, and then I got sidetracked by another book, and I was like, "Well, I'm not in the mood for this now."
Of course.
So I will get back to it, but they're shorter books, which is nice
They
for
are, yes, and they're such quick reads too. It's
yes.
not really dense or anything like that.
Yeah, I love a good palate cleanser book. Like, I love that so much. I feel like that's where I do a lot of my rereading is I go back to a book that I know I really like and maybe one that's
Yeah.
not 500 or 600 pages. So, do you have a book in particular that you kind of go back to for that type of thing?
Du Maurier is my author for the or she has been for a long time. Though I only read 1 Du Maurier in 2023, and it was on my worst books of the year, so we're gonna
Mm.
not talk about that right now. But historically, she's
Yeah.
like my comfort read.
Mhm. That's me with Harry Potter. I always go back to Harry Potter. I'm like, "Cool. I know exactly what's happening," and
Oh, if I'm sorry, if we're talking about rereads, then it's Peter Pan
oh, yeah, I have my copy here somewhere, right there.
somewhere.
Yeah. So where did the nautical theme come in for you? Because you love a good ship story. So at what
Yeah.
point did that start for you?
Okay. Do you remember the Selection series by Kiera Cass?
I do not
Okay,
know.
it was the Hunger Games era when everything had to be
Yes.
dystopian.
Yes.
Okay.
Now I know what you're talking about. Yep.
It's like The Bachelor and Hunger Games.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, in my contemporary era,
Mhm.
contemporary/dystopian era, I loved the Selection series so much.
Okay.
So, I wanted to read everything Kiera Cass put out. She wrote this standalone called The Siren, and it was a
I have
girl
heard of the siren. Yes, I know this book.
the ocean calls to her. And do you
Yes.
know that nothing has been truer to who I am as a person than the ocean calling to me.
Oh my
So I
gosh,
was
that's
like,
amazing.
"There's books where the ocean calls to people?" And then that's all I wanted. It's still all I want.
I get that on such a human level because I'm such a water person. Like, I
Yes!
live in the water. So, yeah,
See,
like,
that's why we live on an island.
there you go. Yeah, like, swimming is my main source of exercise. Like, I love swimming. I was a competitive swimmer. I swim. Like, that's my thing. So, yeah, I love water stuff too. But whenever, like, my mom loves pirate stories, like lives for pirate stories. And she was here probably like a year ago. Because I desperately wanted a break from my kid. And I was like, please come babysit for me. And she was scrolling through YouTube and she came across your video of like top pirate stories. And she was like, oh, what's this? And put it on. And
It's so embarrassing.
I swear to God, it was so funny. I was like, oh yeah, that's Merphy. She makes really great videos. And she's like, I'm gonna pause this and go get a notepad and take notes. Like it is like 1980 that she can't use her phone. So she's sitting there with a notepad, pausing you like every 4 minutes, and is just writing down all of these pirates.
Did she like any of them?
I don't know which one she's read. I'll have to ask her. But like, I remember then when you got to One Piece, she's like, I'm not going to read that one. I was like,
Fair
no,
enough.
that's not for you. But that's so funny.
Hey, Rogue V1, hush it with that. I want to live coastal. I desire it more than so many things in my life.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, but someday I will live by the ocean and then
Does
my life
Corey
will be
wanna live
complete.
by the ocean?
He's, when I tell him that it's in my 10-year plan, he never tells me no. I've never actually asked if he wants to, but he's never told me no.
Yep, I hear you. So which ocean are you leaning towards at this time?
I want to live in Puerto Rico. He has told me
Fair.
no to that.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I don't know yet. I think I feel more called probably like around where you are actually
Mm,
appeals to me a lot.
yeah.
But I would also be just anywhere that's swimmable, anywhere that's not super, super rough.
Yeah, that's fair. You don't
I've
wanna
I've lived in Northern California and in North Carolina, and I like the North Carolina area a little bit better.
Where in, Northern California were you?
Chico?
Okay. And did you like it out there? I love Northern California.
I liked where I lived. I don't
Yeah.
think I would go back to California, but I did like Chico.
That's fair. It's super expensive to live there.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
That's part of why it's in my
yeah,
10-year plan to move
yeah,
coastal because
exactly.
he's like, "Do you know how much it would cost to buy a house by the
Yeah,
ocean?" And I'm like,
yeah.
"But in my dreams, maybe we could."
It's the siren. It's calling. It's
I
calling. You
know.
can't
I
ignore
know. Trust me.
it. That's so funny. So would you say that that's kind of become like your favorite subgenre of fantasy is nautical fantasy, like without question?
I think that would be fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Chico is not on the coast, it's true. I lived in Redding for a bit as well, which was a lot closer. We would go
Yeah.
to Whiskey Town a lot, which is
Mhm.
a beach, but it was still close enough, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway, have you ever had somebody in real life look up your channel and then start actively watching your channel and referencing your videos when they talk to you in real life?
No, thankfully. One of my best friends will do this though, where she's like, "Oh, in this, like, can you explain this to me?" And I'm like, "I guess, but you haven't read the book, so like, why did you watch this?" Which I love her for because like she's being supportive, but she's not a fantasy reader, and it's just like she'll come at me with really hilarious questions, but then she sends it to her brother who is a fantasy reader, so I always think that that's really funny. But yeah, I don't tell a lot of people.
Me either.
Yeah, like my close friends know, and then I posted because my channel initially started off as a podcast with my husband. So I shared that initially, and I was like, "Oh yeah, like we're doing this," and because we were doing book to show comparisons, um, and then we were talking about the Lord of the Rings show, Rings of Power, which wasn't really a book comparison, but we would talk about the Silmarillion a little bit, and then he tapped out because he was like, I'm way too tired because we had like a newborn. And I was like, you know what I need to do with a newborn? A whole lot of projects, like clearly. So that became my thing. And then I told a few people and didn't really tell people after. So it's Okay.
Yeah, so the a fun thing is when you're an adult, people don't know how to just, like, start talking to you
Yeah.
normally, so they're just like, "What do you do for work?" As if that's a part of my personality.
Yeah, that is your
So
personality. There's
yeah,
no
like,
distinguishing it.
ask me what my hobbies are.
Yeah,
Ask me,
no.
like, "Do you like to go for a hike?" I'll talk to you about hiking. Like, why do you
Right?
need to know what I do for a living?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not who I am. I mean, it is a
Mhm.
little bit, but
Yeah.
it's just I'm just ashamed to tell them I'm a YouTuber. So, instead, I tell them I narrate audiobooks, and
Ah.
that's gone great for me, except that Corey is my video editor. So then they ask Corey, "What do you do?" And he's not embarrassed. So he says, "She's a YouTuber. I edit her
Oh.
videos."
Oh, geez.
I'm like, "Just say you're a video editor. You don't have to include
Mhm.
me in that."
Well, that's so it's somewhat similar for me, but it's different. So my job is I have a food blog. Like that's my job. And when people ask me what I do for work, I'm like, oh, I'm a recipe developer. Because I don't want to get into the minutia of being like, oh, I'm a blogger. Like that's my job. But and then sometimes I tell people I'm like, I do food photography for a living because I do, and like I've worked for companies and stuff. But yeah, I get really awkward about it, and I'm like, yep. Or I'm just like,
Well,
I work for myself.
it's like I feel like people when you say you're a YouTuber, people either think because okay, so usually the questions I get, and a lot of people are really kind and they're like, "Wow, that's great. What's your channel about?" But a lot of questions, people will automatically assume I'm a like beauty or fashion YouTuber or I'm like a Jake Paul. And I don't want I just want to be able to answer something else.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because Evie, I literally don't talk about it. I have one little section in my Discord where I sometimes share recipes, and that's it. Like, that's it.
You have just that was like a knife in the back.
I'm so sorry.
Wait, really?
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, no, I don't really, I don't know. I don't tell people about it a whole lot, which is ironic because my close friends do know about it because they're the ones that I'm yelling at about, like, please read these books. So, and when I say to them, I'm like, I met Booktube friends that also are reading this. And I'm like, that's kind of how it comes up. Yes, you will, Evie. I know this
Okay,
is
but if
not
you
your friend.
don't, then she won't read The Spear That Cuts Through Water. Spear Through Water. Spear Cuts Through Water.
I think it's the spirit that cuts
The one that's
through
now your
water.
personality.
Yeah, exactly. The one that you love.
Yeah, Murphy Begins Mr. Beast style videos. Exactly. That's what people will think if I tell them I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's really strange, right? Because people have very preconceived ideas of all of that stuff. The spear cuts through water. Okay, not the spear that cuts through water.
Yeah,
I'm very
I was
sorry.
adding a word. I knew it was wrong.
I mean, we got there in the end. Thank you, Evie. But it's fine. I'm waiting though for that to happen, like because I have had people that have said that they're like, oh yeah, I mentioned that I have a channel, and they'll like look it up in front of you, and
In front of
and
you. In
yeah,
front of you. They pull out their phone and they're like, "Great, let me start watching your channel." And I'm like,
yeah,
"No, I would like to develop a friendship with you. So I want it to be on even ground. I don't want you to
mhm,
start watching me and then the scales are tipped, and then I know
mhm.
this much about you, but you know this much about me."
Yeah,
That
right.
makes things feel awkward.
It's kind of like blind dating in a way, where it's like someone can like look you up and knows all these things about you, and you show up and you're just like, hey, happy
Right,
to chat, and they're like,
right.
I know so much about you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, great. So I saw that you did this week," or, "Oh, I know that whatever." And I'm just like, or I share something in a video and they're like, "Great, you got a new cat." And I'm like, I don't know what you did this week, you know? Like,
I
talk to
also
me
did
about
message you about your cat. I was like, "Oh, your cat
That's
looks really
fine.
cute in your video."
That's fine.
No, I get it though. I mean, yeah, I know some people are very comfortable with sharing their channel regularly and stuff. I shared my first couple of videos and I was like, I'm done. So yeah, it was just one of those things for like my close circle of friends where I was like, if you want to subscribe, so I'm talking to at least one person, that would be great. If not, that's fine too. My favorite though is that like my dad will take photos of my videos and send them to
That's
me,
so
and I'm like,
cute.
oh God, please stop. Like, please
That's
stop.
so cute.
Oh, yeah. So,
My dad travels all over for work,
mm,
and he tells people, "My daughter's a YouTuber," and
oh,
blah, 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 and, like, he, like and I'm like, "Dad, are you not embarrassed that I'm a YouTuber?" He's like, "No, why would I be embarrassed?"
so when did that become like a full-time thing for you? How far into your YouTube journey was that something that you were like, oh yeah, I can do this full time?
So, I'm really bad at timelines, and it's all kinda wishy-washy for me because I was doing audiobook narration, manuscript critiques, and YouTube all together as my full-time thing. And that started in 2020,
Okay.
when I was a stay-at-home mom, Corey lost his job because of COVID, and so I was like, "Okay, this is what we've got now,
Yeah.
so we're gonna focus on it, and
Yeah.
this is literally it for us."
Yeah.
So we went all in, and just both devoted all of our time to it so that, we had a job,
Yeah.
and so that was the 3 things that the 2 of us covered,
Hmm.
and, he edited my videos as well as my audiobooks, and then, from there, I guess that was it. So I guess that was when I went full-time with those 3 things, but
Hmm.
then eventually it got to be too much for me to do all 3, so I dropped 1, and then I still do narration some, but, I'm mostly just YouTube now, but I don't know when that happened.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know when it was mostly YouTube and when I stopped doing the others as much.
Hmm.
So that's a
And
bad answer.
do you find it like, how do you keep up that momentum? Because anytime I finish one of your videos and you're like, I post videos, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, how though? Like,
I know,
how?
it's so much. How do I keep the momentum? A big part of it is that Corey works with me. Like,
Yeah,
I couldn't do this much if it was just me doing it
sure.
all. So he takes a huge load off of me. Like, he answers my emails, which is probably why I'm so bad at replying to the personal ones because he handles the rest.
Ah,
Um, he handles, like, setting me up for videos, and he handles the camera and all the editing, and, like,
mhm,
everything that's not planning and filming, he takes care of. So that's
sure.
a big part of why I can do as much as I can do. And then the other part is because I'm an obsessive person. So I'm
Mhm.
just like, "This is my thing, and I like it." Night, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I get that completely. For me, my whole thing was I was also a stay-at-home mom. But even though like I have my my job too, like I have 2 full-time jobs. But I was like, I'm not really getting much of like a creative outlet. And I was like, oh, I just want to do this, like talk to people about books. And I didn't know that that existed on the internet for a really long time. Like, I only discovered it during COVID, really, and it was because I found Bookborn's channel and she was doing her Wheel of Time comparisons because we watched the first few episodes of Wheel of Time and we were like, "Well, this is terrible." Like, and then we wanted to show to book comparison. I was like, "Oh, people like use YouTube for non-music things. That's interesting to me." And like had no concept of the fact that people actually talk to each other on the internet about like fun nerdy things, which I don't know why my brain didn't put that together. And then your Harry Potter video came up as a suggestion from her channel and I was like, excellent, I love Harry Potter, and then clicked on that. I was like, oh, this is like a thing people do, like you can do this, like that's
That's yes.
awesome. So
Yes. That's
yeah.
I mean, I it's so funny because that's essentially so when I was reading a book, I got to a plot twist that I didn't understand, and so I Googled it, and then
Mhm.
I found a Booktube video off of it, and I was like, "Oh,
Interesting.
this is an option." And it's
Yeah.
like it's like once that world opens up to us, we're just like,
Yeah.
"And here I am."
Right? That's kind of the whole thing, and, like, I had this really awkward aversion for a long time. I was like, "I don't really wanna be on camera." Like, I feel very awkward being on camera because as a photographer, I'm always behind the camera, so I was like, I'm comfortable taking photos of things and people, but, like, putting myself out there and it being my face kinda creeps me out, and that took me probably, like, 8 months of, like, amping myself up to be like, you can sit in our basement in front of your iPhone and just talk about a book and it's not going to be a big deal, and was super self-conscious about it at first, and now I just don't care.
Yeah,
But
and Booktube is very talking head centric.
yeah.
Like most genres, not most, but a lot of genres of YouTube videos are editing heavy. And Booktube is like, here I am, I'm talking to you. That's
Mhm.
all you get. And so
Yeah.
you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's so weird, and that's the thing, like, I am that person that I have 0 problem if I see someone in a store or, like, on the street that's carrying something that I love, I'm like, "You and I like the same things," and immediately wanna talk to them, but I think it's because you're not getting that immediate human reaction where you're staring at technology, and I'm just like, "Oh, I just have to sit here and speak my feelings. Cool." So,
That's
it's a weird
interesting.
thing.
I've never considered that because I'm the same way. If I see somebody
Mhm.
out in the wild holding a book,
Oh,
then I'm
yeah.
like, I know about that book because I know about
Yeah.
all the books. Like, I
Yeah.
haven't read it, but I know about it through osmosis.
Exact the same,
So,
exactly.
let's talk. I can get basic plot points through,
Yeah,
like, we're gonna talk about
exactly.
this.
Through my telekinetic abilities, you and I both like books, so you and I are gonna be best friends.
Yes, and on the beach, people bring books,
Oh,
so I can
yeah.
just, like, scout who I can talk to on the
Mhm,
beach. It's the best.
mhm.
People
Yeah,
are generally nice too. Most
I
of the
know.
time, they're
That
friendly.
most of the time, and then you have that one person so like, "I just wanna read and not talk to you," and I'm like, "I get it." So, it's okay, but, like, that's generally how I've always been, where, like and it could be anything, like, if I see someone wearing a shirt that's, like, a band or a film or a quote or anything that I'm familiar with and, like, I'm like, like, trying to make
Same,
direct eye contact with
same.
them, and I'm like, "I'm coming to talk to you in less than 30 seconds, so get ready."
Get prepared,
Yeah,
'cause we're gonna
and
be besties at the end of
it's
it. We're
it's
exchanging numbers.
happening, like, it's happening. I remember when I saw, Bookworm's video, the first one, I looked at my husband, I was like, "She and I are thinking the same things." I was like, "We would be great friends if she and I sat down in a room and talked to each other." And lo and behold, we're now friends. So I was like, "There you go." It's just this, like,
I
innate
do
thing
that
where you're
too.
like, you connect and you get it. But it's it's so different when you're sitting down and you're not getting that immediate interaction with people. But what's so interesting is that you do formulate these communities that start gravitating to you because they're like, I agree and I want to hear more and engage more. And that's become so interesting that you kind of now have two distinctive communities, right? You have your really bookish community and then you have your manga community, which is kind of like become a massive thing for you. So that's been really, really interesting to watch as well.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, they're different vibes for sure,
Hmm.
but, in both spaces, I think I've just been very fortunate that it's a good space to be in. The internet can be
Mean.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And it still is, but I think that I've been very fortunate that generally it's, like, a pleasant place to be.
Yeah, I hear you. That's rare and very special.
Do you feel like you've gotten that experience as well?
I think it's been mostly positive. My channel's still quite small, so I don't feel like I've had too much exposure where it's been really bad. I have had a couple of comments where people are like, "You're absolutely incorrect," and I'm like, "Delete." So that's been fine. But it's kind of strange. Like in certain cases, I'm really not a sensitive person, and then in other cases, I'm a highly sensitive person. So I knew going into it, I was like, you're gonna have to don your thick skin here, like because people are gonna disagree with you and tell you that you're wrong, which is fine. Like I am all for having a discourse as long as people are actually willing to have a discourse rather than it just being a straight up opinion that they are correct and there's no wiggle room on that. Um, but I like just being able to engage with people because like I love when people disagree. Like I actually really like when people disagree because I feel like in terms of ingesting and digesting content, it makes it so much more interesting, especially with books, because you're getting both perspectives and it's like, okay, why didn't you like it and why did you like it so much? And I feel like I come out of those conversations richer because I've now understood the book at a deeper level from someone else's perspective. And I really enjoy that part of it. So, in terms of it being not always a positive place, if I can get that from it, it's fine. If it's just the blatant rudeness, I'm like, well, you know,
Yeah, there's a big difference between, I had a different perspective on that book, or, "Oh, you took this away, but I actually think that maybe the author was going for this." And
Mhm.
all of that is great. I
Yeah.
love comments that challenge me to
Yes.
think differently. But there's also a difference between that and just like a "you're just being sensitive" comment
Mhm.
or, like something that's I disagree with you, but rather than explaining my perspective, I'm just gonna insult you.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that it's like, "The internet is exhausting. Why am I
Yeah.
here?"
Exactly. It's like, go find something else to do.
Right. Right. If you can't articulate your points, then just give it a thumbs down and leave.
Exactly. I said to a few people a few times, I'm like, "This is not the right channel for you, clearly. Like, maybe just move on to somewhere else. It's okay. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying or accept my content. Like, I really it's fine." So, but I think that's also been part of the experience for me as a whole is getting more confident in myself and kind of what you were saying earlier in the sense that some people I feel out of the gate are very articulate with their feelings in regards to what they didn't like, what they did like. And I feel that in those instances that you are not necessarily being challenged, but maybe there is a little bit more of a push for explain yourself, it helps you because you're like,
Yes.
"Oh, I can
Yes.
articulate this so much better than
Yes.
I would have maybe been able to 6 months ago, a year ago, many years ago," because the language and vernacular that you're getting from those exchanges is so different. And I've really appreciated that part of it. And I also just love the fact that I know for most of my videos that like there's a core group of people that are going to be there in the comment section. And I really look forward to their opinions on what I've read or what I've said. I'm like, oh, like you guys are here.
Yeah.
And that's always really nice. So I've really grown to love that part of
Yeah, absolutely, and it's true that, like, true genuine friendships can be built over this.
oh yeah.
Obviously, we make friends in Booktube, like, each other, but I've
Hmm.
also made plenty of friends that are my commenters, that are, like, on my
Hmm.
Discord that I talk to daily, and then I've met up with people that are just on my Discord that aren't,
Yeah.
like, Booktubers. It's like real genuine friendships are
Hmm.
made through this, and that too is a gift. So I feel like I'm becoming more well acquainted with my personal interests and
Hmm.
with like what I do like and don't like and why. I'm
Hmm.
becoming a better communicator. I'm becoming a better analysis. Not that I'm amazing, but like I'm learning, you know?
Hmm.
And on top of that, I'm also making really, really strong friendships. So there's
Yeah.
pros and cons to being online, of
Oh, for sure.
course. But I mean, truly, I'm so grateful for the space that I've been able to develop here and all that comes with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I'm planning to go to Dragonsteel this year, and there's like 10 or 11 of us, and I'm like, this is so exciting. I'm like, I'm gonna get to meet you guys and see you, and you're all gonna think that I'm really annoying in person, and it's gonna be awesome. Like, I'm so excited.
We're all really annoying in
Yeah,
person. It's gonna be great.
it's fine. It's so good. But it's just one of those things too that like I moved during COVID to a rural area and like didn't really have many people to interact with. And it's not like we were going out at that point anyway. So I was like, oh, this is a really cool thing that you can actually have a social outlet online without having to like leave the house. When you can't really go out and do anything, you can still feel like you have those interpersonal connections with people and you're getting to know people and you have this shared common interest, or you can do a buddy read if you really want to and like lean into what someone is, maybe pulling you into. So, yeah, I think there's just so many benefits to it that it really does outweigh the cons for the most part. But again, I'm still itty bitty, so we'll see if it gets bigger and more of the grumpuses kind of show up and leave some negative stuff in my comments.
They
But
will.
yeah,
They
it's
will. But
fun.
that's another thing that I'm learning is I'm learning to take critical feedback a lot better than I
Mhm.
used to. I'm learning to get better at seeing when someone isn't really giving me feedback, they're just giving me insults and learning
Yeah,
to not take that in
yeah,
and like process through the fact that not everybody's going to like me and that's going to be okay. Like
yes.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm learning that as well. And it's a hard lesson sometimes, but it's
It
again, in the end, it's a gift.
It is. I had that for me really kicked in grad school. My thesis supervisor was not a very nice man and made us do this thing where you had to write a paper, send it out to the whole class, and then they would like tear into you for our next session and try to prove you wrong for like 2 straight hours. So
And then I would cry.
yeah, it was one of those things that the first time it happened, like it wasn't even my paper. And I went up to the person afterwards. I was like, "Are you okay?" Like, it was just one of those things where I was like, "I'm genuinely concerned about your well-being." Like, that was not a pleasant experience. And then I was just sitting there looming in my brain. I'm like, "Oh, in 3 weeks, that's me. Cool." So that experience for me, I remember when it happened. I was dating my husband at the time. I called him after and I was like, well, I survived and I actually feel great about it because in the moment
Yay!
I was able to like defend my points and my thesis and like all kinds of stuff. And I was like, oh, that made me way more confident in my capability of saying, this is my point. I can articulate it well. You don't have to agree with it, but that's what it is. And after that moment, I was just like, okay, I can do this. And then still it took me, a little while to get my courage for Booktube, but still. So that though was like the catalyst where I was like, oh, there is a possibility of my being comfortable to do this at some point.
That's great. That's
But
awesome. That sounds like a terrifying but
yeah,
beneficial thing
yeah.
that happened.
It was not great, but I survived. So it was fine. So in terms of like things that you gravitate to in books, are there specific tropes that you really love in books that you're like automatically, if you know that's going to be in a book, you're like, yes, I'm there. I'm there for
Mm.
that trope.
Yeah, so found family is
Mhm.
definitely one,
Yeah.
but if I hear that there's, like, some sort of nature magic or elemental magic, I'm
Yeah.
instantly interested. I also really love portal fantasy, doorway fantasy,
Yes. Me
anything
too.
Narnia-esque, which, by the way, Andrew and I are about to read one. It's a Tchaikovsky book,
I haven't
um,
read anything by him yet.
and Put Away Childish Things.
Okay.
It's only a 6-hour audiobook.
That's
And
easy. That's
it's
easy.
a
You're
it's a
speaking my
portal,
language.
Narnia, I know, and
Okay.
he's a really easy to read. So, I mean, I know the audiobook length because it's on Scribd. But anyway, uh, so that's a really good one for me. I think just really strong friendships, which kind of is the same thing as found family.
Yeah.
Nautical.
Yeah.
Shocker. What about you?
I love a found family. I'm so in for found family. That for me is a big one. I also love Portal Fantasy. Like I'm really into Portal
We're
Fantasy.
twins.
Yeah, I did a video on Portal Fantasy last year. I was like, why do we like it so much? And I was compelled to say just because it's great, But I was like, I'm actually going to try to dig into this and see what it is.
Good.
But
That's
yeah,
it. That's it. We're challenging ourselves to be
right.
deeper thinkers.
Exactly. I mean, I think for me in part two, the first fantasy exposure I had was Narnia. When I read it, I reread the book probably like 7 times that year because I just loved it. And then I got the whole collection, and I love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Like I haven't reread it in many, many years, but my favorite was The Magician's Nephew,
Uh-huh.
which is probably not a very popular opinion, but it was because the whole book is portal fantasy. Like they just keep going back and forth between Earth and Narnia, which I thought was hilarious. And then it's the creation of Narnia. And I was like, ooh, like
Ooh.
I really like this. Like I love creation stories. So that for
Ooh.
me is a really interesting thing, which during my undergrad, because I did classical history, I took a million mythology classes and I was like, I really lean into creation myths. Like I find that so interesting. And I think in part it's kind of what I was saying earlier with fantasy that I love discovering a new world and a new world being created because
Mhm.
it feels so new, right? And
Mhm.
I love that feeling of newness, but that's not to say that like I love when you're really deep in a series too, right? And it feels familiar and you know it so well and you're like, oh, it feels like I've been here forever. And that's also a wonderful feeling. But just that idea of creating a new
I
space.
am having such a hard time thinking of a creation fiction. Like, what do you have? What do you create? What's an example of that?
The Magician's Nephew. I mean, that's probably the biggest one that I would think of, like straight up with just like that. People are saying A Wrinkle in Time, maybe. Is that
Oh,
what I'm
I haven't
saying?
read that.
I haven't read that either. um, you'd love the Circle of Magic series then. There
Me?
you go. Different kind of elemental magic and has
Okay.
found family. That might be exactly what you're looking for.
Sounds pretty good. Is
Um,
it set on the ocean? Because if we could get that buzzword in there too.
are they literally just floating in the ocean? So,
Are they mermaids doing
yes,
whatever?
to answer this, Orlando, Cersei is similar like this for me because it's not the creation myth itself, but different parts of the creation myth are like happening within Cersei, which I really enjoyed. I loved Cersei. The never ending story, people are saying.
I'm looking at my shelves, just really trying to, because that sounds really cool, and I cannot think of a book.
I'll have to think of it and like send you. Oh, the Norse mythology book by Neil Gaiman does that as well. Takes you through the creation all the way to the end, which is really interesting. Um, Neil Gaiman kind of does it a few times, but that's because Neil Gaiman's a gem among gems.
He is, for
Yes,
real.
I love him so much. I'm so excited because I saw him speak several years ago, and he's going back to the same venue this summer, and we're gonna go see him
Ooh.
again. So I'm so excited.
Nice.
Yeah, he posted it on Instagram, and I like stopped what I was doing, and I found my husband. And I was like, I am setting an alarm so we buy tickets as soon as it goes live. And he was like, okay. And I was like, okay, it's happening. So, I was very intense about it and very excited. And then
I love that your husband's
just
just like, yes, okay, weirdo.
yeah, I was basically like, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna see Neil. And he was like, okay. It's
Sure.
fine. It's fine, Laura. Yeah. So I'm very excited. I do you have a favorite Neil Gaiman novel or book?
So I'm not super well read in his stuff. I loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane.
Mm. Surprise!
He
There's water in the title.
uh Neverwhere was really good.
Mm.
It's one of the only books that has legitimately given me a panic attack while I was reading it.
I think I
Um,
know which scene you're talking about.
the
Yeah.
allergic reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I nearly died reading it. And then I think there was another scene with heights that also was like very like hyperventilating for me.
Mhm. Evie, to answer this question, he loved the Expanse books, so it's possibly that. And he loves Guy Gabriel Kay. So I
Mm.
would say that those are probably his top two, but he also loves The Song of Ice and Fire, but I also love those. So, but I haven't read the Expanse books, and I think I might give it a try this year. Have you read any of the Expanse? Yeah. Just haven't been in the mood.
I think I might have DNF'd the first book.
Did you?
I might have. I'm not sure. I can't really remember. Hard to say.
I meant to ask you as the follow-up question before. That was very rude of me. So in terms of genres, I was saying like my favorite one other than fantasy is probably historical fiction and then just straight up history. So now that fantasy is your dominantly read genre, would you say that that is your now favorite genre or is just what you read the most of?
I would say it's probably my favorite genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, literary fiction is also one that I am very drawn to. Like Frederick Bachman is tied as my favorite author with Joe
Mhm.
Abercrombie. But I don't read nearly as much of it because I seek the feeling of wonder the most when I'm reading. But I've been really into sci-fi lately. I got bit by the sci-fi bug. So I don't know, I just like books, man.
Yeah,
Like,
I hear
I like
you.
I like a good classic. I like a good like I don't know, just fiction, like Du
Mhm.
Maurier, what she writes. I just like books.
I know, right? It's hard to pick. Like, we'll play this game, my husband and I, where we're like, "Oh, what's your favorite book or favorite author?" And I'm like, "I can't choose. Like, it's just Sophie's choice. I just can't choose."
Mhm.
Yeah, I know you love Don Quixote, Evie.
Do you have do you have any, books that any genres that you don't like reading? Sorry, Evie, I was trying to find my Don Quixote, but I think it's over on the other shelf.
Horror. I have zero interest in horror.
No horror at
Yeah,
all, ever? What
yeah.
about, like, Phantom of the Opera? Like a light horror?
I don't really consider that horror though.
I think it is.
Is it?
I mean, like, drama, but I think it's a horror.
So it's interesting because I'm in a writers group and one of our members writes horror. And I had to explain to him, I was like, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm just disappointing you over and over
This
again.
hurts me.
But he warned me, he's like, I predominantly write horror. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. But not like I don't know how to critique this properly because I'm not
Yeah.
versed in the genre. I
Yeah.
was like, I can critique it in the sense of like what it evokes in me as a reader and
Fear.
grammatically. Yeah, right. But like I have no desire to ever read Stephen King. Like that for me is just it's one of those things that I am that person that like I can't watch thrillers. Like I'm like, oh well, they're real. So and I get way too paranoid. So I'm just not cut out for horror. It's not for me.
Evie, did you like The Last Final Girls by Stephen Graham Jones? Because I hated that. But I loved Night of the Mannequins and Mapping the Interior. Yes, it
Matt,
is a
you
very
are
wide
correct.
genre.
Horror is a very wide genre. And
So is
from what
fantasy, so is lit
it
fic. They
is,
all are.
that's the thing. Like I feel for me, horror in the sense of like the Exorcist type thing. Like I don't have any desire to read that.
Oh,
Or I
sure.
know like you've read it and stuff like that. Like I don't really want to read it. I have read Stephen King novellas. Like I've read Shawshank Redemption and I loved it. I've read Shawshank Redemption probably like 6 times. But in terms of regular stuff for him, like I don't want to read Pet Cemetery. I don't want to read it. Like it's just it's not for me. But I'm happy it's for other people.
So if you went for something like 11/22/63, you might have a better time because that's more
Mhm.
thriller and historical
Yeah.
and and contemporary. I have read 10 Stephen King books because every time I read one, his fans say, "You haven't read enough to decide if you like him or not." And
Oh,
once I
I
got to
love that,
10, I
right?
was like, "I am double digits. I can say that this is not the author
Oh
for
my
me
gosh.
now."
I have such a hard feeling on this, right? Where it's like, so if you read a book by an author, kind of like what you were saying with Naomi Novik before, where it's like you have a visceral reaction to the first book that you read, be it really positive or negative. It's like it's so hard to go back if it's a negative reaction
It
and give them a
is.
second chance, right?
It
It's so
is.
hard, but it can be so worth it. But
Yeah.
also, one book can sometimes be enough of a deciding factor to be like,
Mm.
no, that's just not for me.
Yeah,
But
I would have thought that after reading Uprooted.
but now we have
I
more
know.
dragons and it's
I know.
excellent. So it's so good.
I know. I really have to swallow my pride over that. I was like, man, I really wanted to hate that book. I loved it so much.
See, that's how I felt about Fourth Wing. I was like, I don't want to be that person. I was like, I am so basic. I loved this. Like,
I just
that's
told you I loved the selection series. You think you're
right.
gonna get judgment from
Oh
me?
my gosh. It was one of those things that like after I read it, I was like, I was having such an identity crisis that I was texting my friends and I was like, I don't even know what to do with myself. Like, what am I supposed to read now? Like, it was.
You're all about that romantasy life now.
I felt very confronted, very, very confronted. But it's one of those things that it's just like, I love having that kind of experience where you're like, oh, anticipating that it's gonna maybe not be for you or kind of middle of the road, and then it shocks you in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been lucky. Like last year, I had a great reading year. It was one of those years where it was just like a lot of 5-star reads, which was really awesome. Super lucky. Haven't had a 5-star read yet this year, but it's still very early. So I'm like, but I've had good books. So I'm excited. Like there's just so many good things to read.
There are. And
Yeah.
now you and I are gonna love projections together.
Yeah. It's going to
Watch
be
you
so great.
watch you not even pick it up.
I'm
And then I'm
going
gonna
to.
guilt trip you,
I will.
even though I sprung it on you in a live stream where you had no ability to tell me no.
Listen, I have no problem saying no to people. That has become the thing that I am the proudest of myself, where I'm just
Good.
able to say no. But
Good. Now
no,
that
like,
we're roomies on an
yes,
island, you
yes,
can
in
be
our
my
little
no
hut.
sayer because I'm
Exactly.
very bad at that.
I no, I am happy to give it a good old try. Because
Oh, I'll probably DNF too. It's okay.
yeah, the description sounded highly
It's gonna be real toxic.
yeah, it's so like that's the thing. It's just I'm trying to this is all part of this identity crisis where I'm like, what do you even like anymore? Like it's so weird, you know? It's just weird. So I'll have to see. I don't know, Merphy. I don't know.
This'll be great.
It's gonna
Tom,
be fantastic.
read projections with us. That way we'll bail. And you, since you can't DNF, will
Oh yes,
suffer
Tom.
through.
That'll be perfect. My Cosmere already he also read the whole Cosmere last year. Tom was
I
very
know.
yeah, super busy.
Loon bat.
So, what is like your do you have a series this year that you're kind of looking to tackle because you plan out your reading super far in advance, or is it just
Yeah,
kind of
I'm currently reading through Dresden
okay?
and the Temeraire series and Discworld, which I'm not gonna finish Discworld this year. But Temeraire and Dresden I should finish this year. And then I am gonna start the Long Price Quartet, which I'm really
Yeah,
excited about because
I got
everybody loves it.
I got book one for Josh for Christmas.
Did you?
So yeah, I did.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And I read Annihilation last year and I loved it. So I'm gonna
Did
finish
you?
that. Yes. So I'm gonna finish that trilogy this year. And I don't know when the fourth book comes out. It is a
Mhm.
trilogy, by the way. I didn't misspeak, but there
Yeah.
also is now a fourth book coming out.
Fourth book, yeah.
And so I'll probably read that as well. So yeah, a
So
couple of things.
sell me on Dresden. Like sell me on it because
I'm probably not the one.
I've heard such mixed things about this series. Like one of my old roommate messaged me out of nowhere because here's an example of someone being like, "Oh, I saw one of your videos," and I was like, "Great," and he was like, "I think you would like the Dresden Files," and I was like, "From everything I've heard, I would absolutely not, but please tell me why it is I would like it." And I never get
Okay.
a clear like. What are these books about? Are they urban fantasy? Like, what time period do these books take place
Okay.
in?
So, what time period? I don't know the answer. Probably like the 50s or 60s,
Okay,
in Chicago. Someone in the chat will probably correct me. I don't remember exactly
whatever.
what time period. But anyway, Dresden. So Harry is a wizard. Yes,
Okay.
Harry is a wizard. So Harry Dresden is a wizard, and he works as a private detective. So when a supernatural murder goes down, the police department calls him, and he investigates it. And at first, the first few books kind of read as like standalone detective noir
Mm,
stories with an urban fantasy twist bent
okay.
to them. And so they feel very serialized, and the quality is, hit or miss.
Mhm.
Like some books are enjoyable, some are rough.
Yeah.
The second book is rough. But so you have to somewhat enjoy the books for what they are in order to push to through to when the series becomes something great. And that's
Mhm.
when, the world really opens up. It stops feeling so serialized. The
Okay.
characters are so rich, and the way that they're written, their relationships among them, it's like, oh my goodness. And like there are certain things that, because it has this urban fantasy side, there are
Mhm.
scenes that are bonkers. Like it just goes for it,
Yeah.
which is so fun for me. But it's also very there's a reason that it has such
I
bye. There's a reason it has such mixed opinions out there. It
yeah,
it too is flawed.
I've seen a lot of, descriptions of women in particular.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, why it's super cringy, and I'm like, "Cool," but apparently I like romantasy now, so I'm open to anything now, Murphy.
I would say they're quick reads. So if you give book 1 a go and you hate it, then you hate it.
Yeah.
And if you give it a go and you're like, "You know what? There's something here. I'm looking forward to seeing it turn into something more,"
Mhm.
then, you can go from there.
Usually that person that will give if it's a long series, I'll usually give it 2 books just to
Okay, well,
see.
book 2 is the worst in the series so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I like book 1 though, I will typically push through a little bit and give it a few books,
Book
but
3 was a
yeah.
banger for me,
Okay.
and now that I'm, like, 8-ish books in, book 3 is, like, not even in my top 3.
Mm,
But it was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I'm committed."
yeah. Okay.
So, I
So,
don't know.
we talked a little bit about Well of Ascension earlier and that it's the best of the Mistborn
We
books.
did do that.
Are there rather other book 2s that you were like, "Oh yeah, book 2, supremacy," other than
Words of Radiance. Um, to talk about a series that we haven't talked about yet, have you read the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy?
I haven't, no, but I've been
Okay.
told it's very good.
Mm, yeah. So, book 2 is, not Death's End, what is The Dark Forest? No. What does it say? It's yellow with white words. There's no way I could read that. What was the graphic designer thinking? I think it's called The Dark Forest.
Okay,
Anyway, book 2 in that trilogy is like a 10 out of 10, stupendous. Holy cow.
okay,
Good.
alright. Are you of the opinion for First Law that the second book is better than the first book, or are you like me that the first book is better?
Yeah, I think I liked the second book better
Okay.
in First Law.
I love all of them, but I liked the first book the best, I feel like.
And I'm pretty sure I like the second book better in the Age of Madness trilogy as well.
I feel like that's a popular opinion. The Trouble with Peace.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, I feel
so
like
good.
most people are like 5 stars, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Cool." Yeah,
10 stars.
I'm excited to get to those, honestly. So did you say he's your favorite author,
Yeah,
Abercrombie?
him and Bachman, they're tied
Yeah.
as my number 1.
He is so funny. I love him so much. Like, I watched your interview with him and then proceeded to watch every interview he's ever given, and I was like, "He's just hilarious."
He's very charming.
Yeah.
He's just enjoyable to watch.
Oh my gosh. He is like I feel as a person, he's Glockta and Giselle put together, where it's like,
That's
it
I don't
sounds
think that's as much of a
terrible. It
compliment as you think it
sounds
is.
terrible, but bear with me. He's got the wittiness of Glockta and just the intelligence of Glockta, but the charisma of Giselle when Giselle wants to be charismatic. And I was like, oh, I see it.
You know what? Speaking of Abercrombie, the Shattered Earth trilogy, book 2 was the best of that trilogy too.
Mm.
You know what? Second book syndrome is a hoax.
See, for me, and I'm not just counting like trilogies and stuff, but Clash of Kings is one of my favorite books, and it's book 2. So like I am also of the opinion, I'm like book 2s are pretty good.
Dead House
And
Gates is also
I
really
haven't read
good.
that one yet, but it's on my list. I have to be in the mood to start Malazan. Like it's one of those
I don't
things.
think you can ever be in the mood. I think
Yeah.
Malazan just happens to
I
you.
think that's kind of what I need to just decide as to when it's gonna happen to me. But,
You
yeah.
know what else has a really good second book? The Gentleman Bastard series.
Joanna is of the opinion that the second book is the best.
You know what? I love her for that.
Yeah, she told me that before. Joanna, I love you, was harassing me to read this book for like a few months. She's like, "You're gonna love this book. This one and Bernard Cornwell's Warlord trilogy." She's like, "You need to read both of these." And I was like, "I promise I will eventually."
When my mood strikes me.
And then I was like, well, Merphy's going to come on. So I'm going to read that one so I can talk to Merphy. And then I have zero timeline on the Warlord one. So that
Okay.
might be in like another 6 years, but that's fine.
Would it help if I told you that book 2, they're blackmailed into becoming pirates?
I
Well,
am
that's
intrigued.
they so half the book takes place on sea. They have to learn to run a ship. I'm just saying.
I do like that. Yes.
It's called Red Seas Under Red Skies.
I do like that title. Okay. So here's a fun game, which is completely unrelated. But my husband likes to play this game with me as well. He says, if you don't need to have read the book, but he said, is there a title of a book that you feel is the best title that you've come across?
A blank of blank and blank. All the books.
Exactly.
Is there a title?
Yeah, just like a title that you're like, "Oh, that's a really great title."
No.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
I get intrigued by certain titles more than others. Like when he asked me the question initially, I was like, Oathbringer is a great title. Like I get really like I'm interested because I'm like, who's bringing the oaths? Like who's making them do the oaths? And it's a title that's making me think about like what the book could be about. So there are stuff like that, and like when I then thought about it deeper, I was like, it's such a basic title, but I really did like Clash of Kings as a title because I'm like, it's so literal, but also it fits the book so well. I also like I love the Gentleman Bastards as that being like a title, but I'm like, it's not really the title, but kind of is the title. So I don't know, like certain titles get me more excited than others. Like sometimes I'll read a title and I'm like, and I'm just kind of like, you couldn't have thought of anything else?
A
Like,
Court of Thorns and Roses?
correct. I'm like, anything else,
Anything. Anything.
anything else. But I don't, I feel like titles can be really fun and evocative, when they
Like
want to
Roses
be.
Under Red Skies.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great title. Like, that's one of those things where I'm like, oh, that's intriguing. Like, The Lies of Locke Lamora. I'm like, what lies are you telling there, Locke?
Oh,
Like, right?
every
Every single
single
one.
lie.
Every single one. So, I mean, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, like, I like those type of titles where there's kind of a mysticism to them, and it's like it's asking you to ask questions type thing.
Mhm.
It's kind of trying
Mhm.
to pull you into this little mystery that it's working on. But yeah, I don't know. Titles.
Titles. I
Right?
agree. Titles. Matt says generic titles annoy me
Annoy
so
me
much.
so much.
I feel like they all are, though.
In a way, they are. Matt, give us some examples of some generic titles. Ooh, The Shadow of the Torture. That's a great title.
Ooh, that
I
is a
like
good
that.
title. I like that.
Yeah. So you are reading several series this year. How much of Discworld do you have left to get through?
I have read, I think, 12.
Oh, so you've still got a ways to go.
I have a lot to go, yeah.
Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's a
I started
yes.
Discworld last year, so I also have a ways to go.
How much have you read?
One. So Josh got me The Color of Magic for Christmas. And what was where are you now? Got me The Color of Magic and Going Postal. And I feel like, yeah, those are the only two that he got me. Because he's like, I wanted to get you one, like the first one. And then he's like, and then I got one that I thought sounded might be up your alley. And I was like, okay. I started The Color of Magic and I was like, I'm really struggling with this book and I don't want to DNF it because I hate DNFing things. So, like, what do I do? And I messaged Alan and I was like, what am I supposed to do? And he was like, read Going Postal. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
Oh, really? He didn't say
Yeah.
read Guards Guards?
No, because I already had Going Postal. So he's like, just switch over to Going Postal. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And I really enjoyed Going Postal. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to continue with the series at some point. And then like I'll jump back into The Color of Magic. I think when I'm a little bit more rooted in the series as a whole. But I got Mort and Reaper Man is where I think I'm gonna jump in next. I want to do Death.
Yeah, Mort is so fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I love Death as a character. Like I love the personification of Death as a character.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Discworld does it so fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's always a delight in every book he shows up in, which is all of them.
I did a video like a while ago now on the personification of death in fantasy. And I was like, I love that we get so much death as a character in fantasy. Like, give me more of this because it's so fun. And I was sitting there and I was like, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett really lean into this trope a lot. And I'm here for it. So it's just great. I love them.
Yeah, I feel like Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett are very different writers, but also so much in common.
Yes. So have you read Good Omens?
No, I haven't.
You're gonna love Good Omens. It's so great. Oh my gosh, it is. I'm shocked you haven't read Good Omens
I
because
know,
it
I
is like
know.
if you want to do a buddy read that like you will not DNF, that is the book because it is everything about satirical and sarcasm like that you would want in a compact book. I love that book so much. When I read it the first time, I was on the train to school and people must have thought I was having a fit because I was legitimately laughing at my book so much. And that was the first time that that had ever happened to me before. I was like, oh, this is a weird experience. And it's just so clever. I love that book so,
I've
so much.
heard such good things about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just have, like, so many books that I wanna read
I know.
of theirs solo before I get to them as a duo.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What do you want to read solo of Gaiman that you haven't gotten to yet?
I haven't gotten to a lot of his books yet, but I know that I really wanna read Coraline soon,
Mm-hmm.
and, I read I don't remember what it's called. It's like Snow White, Glass Apple, or something like that,
Oh, yeah.
and he has a couple others that are in that same vein that I really wanna read through,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a couple others that I can't think of off the top of my head. I have there's a he's got such a big catalog, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of his that look really interesting to me.
I will be happy to talk to you about Neil Gaiman at any time because he is probably my second favorite author. I love him
Who's your
so
number one? Is it
it's
Brandon
probably
Sanderson?
Abercrombie.
Really?
Yeah, it's probably Abercrombie. Which was very confronting for me when I started reading The Blade itself, because
Yeah.
at that point Gaiman was solidified in the first spot. And then I was like, oh, this is really funny and really, really good. And then I finished The Blade itself and I was like, we'll see how I feel after Before They're Hanged. And I read Before They're Hanged and I was like, okay, it's another 4.5 stars. And then Last Argument of Kings, I was like, it's another 4.5 stars. I read the two first standalones and I was like 4 stars and a 5 star. So like, what does this say overall, Joe? We're jiving here. So I need to finish Red Country, see how I feel about Red Country, and then go from there. But I love Abercrombie's style for storytelling. It's just super, super enjoyable for me. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, he really is. He's such a unique writer. I appreciate his writing so much.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm sure everyone here knows where to find you, Merphy, but just in case, would you like to tell them where they could find you?
I have, Merphy Napier books and Merphy Napier manga, so if you like one of those things, I talk about them, sometimes well, sometimes terribly. You can yell at me when I do a bad job.
So the last thing that I try to switch up my last little question that I give for people, but what would you say is an underrated book or manga that you've read that you would love people to read that maybe isn't part of the general conversation?
Oh my goodness, now that you've said that, I'm not gonna be able to think of some hold on, wait just a second. I gotta be able to I'm in my narrator's booth. So let me look at my shelves. I think that Frederick Bachman isn't underrated to me, but I think in the Booktube world,
Uh,
he's not talked about a ton. I loved House of Salt and Sorrows, which I think is not super common,
okay.
for people to talk about on Booktube, and I'm looking at other stuff. I loved The Bone Shard Daughter. I don't know how many
Oh, did
people
you?
know about that. Mhm.
Okay. I've been looking at starting that one, so that's good to know.
I don't know.
Just
I
lots of
think
fun.
I got too excited, and then I didn't have any good answers.
I think those are all fine answers. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. This is so fun to know that we're the same person.
We are You're the exact same person.
So everybody, I'm sure you are following Merphy. If you're not, follow her on both channels. She releases a million videos a week and they're all fantastic. So thank you for joining us in the chat. We appreciate you. Even though I didn't get to all of your comments, I see them here and I will go back and I will review them if anything needs to be answered. You can also leave me a comment on the rewatch if you are rewatching. And as always, Talk to people about the stuff that you love, guys. Clearly, this is not just mine and Merphy's thing where we find strangers and we go up to them and talk to them. Everybody can do it. So we have faith in you. But have a good night. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Bye.